and ensuring that the proper processes are followed.
Jane Clappin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for that answer. I have very vulnerable constituents who have raised concerns about the draft EHRC guidance on transgender people. Many are scared and fear rising transphobia and discrimination. What steps is the Minister taking to ensure that we protect the rights and dignity of everyone in society and support those groups who work with those vulnerable trans people?
I'm deeply sorry to hear about my honourable friend's constituents. On the wider issue she raises, it is of course vital that everyone, including trans people, can live free from harassment and discrimination and can access appropriate services. That's why we are carefully considering the EHRC's draft updated code, making sure the proper processes are followed. And of course the Equality Act upholds safeguards for trans people and we are committed to it.
Christine Jolly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the Secretary of State's clarification. But with organisations like Girl Guiding UK and Women's Institute now saying that they have been forced to exclude the trans community against their will, how soon can we expect this guidance, which the Secretary of State says is being considered?
Mr. Speaker, as I've said many times in this House, I welcome the clarity of the Supreme Court ruling. Providers should follow it. The EHRC have given me a draft code of practice. We're working through it. It is a lengthy document and we will take this further as soon as we can.
Mohammed Yazdi.
Please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I will answer questions 4, 8 and 11 together. Our work to halve violence against women and girls in the course of a decade started the day that we entered government. We have already announced a series of cross-government measures to tackle these crimes, including launching our domestic abuse protection orders, which have already protected over 1,000 victims of domestic abuse since they were launched last November. Our transformative cross-government approach will be underpinned by a new strategy, which we will publish as soon as possible.
Mohammed.
Mr. Speaker, Bedfordshire's Police and Crime Commissioner is working hard to deliver government's mission to halve violence against women and girls, tackling complex domestic abuse cases and driving a 250% increase in case law disclosures. Yet women and girls face serious online harms, including violent pornography, highlighted by Baroness Burton and Ofcom. Given the link between online misogyny and real-world violence, what action will the government take to ensure tech companies properly protect women and girls from serious online harms?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that really important question. Making the online environment a safer place for women and girls is a priority for this government, and it is this government that is outlawing depictions of strangulation and pornography. It is this government taking action to tackle violence against women and girls in all its places. The Online Safety Act has placed a requirement on tech platforms to proactively tackle the most harmful illegal content, much of which disproportionately affects women and girls, including from harassment and intimate image abuse. Ofcom have recently published guidance outlining further steps that services can take to make platforms safer for women and girls, but we are also developing a wider strategy in order to tackle this further.
Jessica Tull.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Shut It Down is an organisation set up by 2 teachers at Winton and Glenmore Academies in my Bournemouth West constituency. It aims to prepare teachers for the tough conversation and work with male pupils to tackle misogyny and promote positive masculinity and healthy relationships. So can the Minister tell me what more she and her department can do to support projects like this and tackle the culture of violence against women and girls at the earliest possible stages?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. Shut It Down and organisations like it are a brilliant tool. Schools should be a place where everyone feels safe and valued, and we want to counter misogynistic views by schools by teaching boys about respect, empathy and equality, Mr. Speaker. We will support teachers on how to deliver the revised statutory guidance on relationships, sex and healthy education, which strengthens consent on healthy relationships with free resources available, and we will be piloting a teacher training grant in 2026.
Sarah Oldham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Today marks the final day of the United Nations 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence, which focus primarily on ending digital violence against women and girls. The domestic abuse charity Refuge has experienced a 62% increase in referrals of technologically facilitated abuse from last year. This abuse can take the form of stalking via tracking devices, non-consensual sharing of intimate images and recording devices being used by abusers to monitor victims. So will the Minister confirm what steps she's taking with the Home Secretary to help tackle violence against women and girls with specific reference to technologically facilitated abuse?
The Honourable Lady is right, and Refuge do brilliant work in supporting victims of tech-based abuse. I've been there to their offices, I've seen their team working really hard on this. This government is determined to have a cross-government approach to this. I'm working really closely with the Home Office, DCIT, looking at how we can really get to the grips with this. We'll be publishing our cross-government Vogue strategy imminently, and there will be a specific reference to on tech abuse in that strategy.
Rebecca Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's dithering on grooming gangs has gone on for so long that it's now unlikely that any report into what's happened will be published before the next general election. So does the Minister think that this is acceptable, and will she commit to publishing interim findings before the next general election?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, the grooming gang scandal was one of the darkest moments in this country's history, with vulnerable young people being failed time and time again. The Prime Minister, the Home Secretary and I are determined to finally get victims and survivors the answers that they need. And it was he, the Prime Minister, who brought the first ever major prosecution on the Asian grooming gangs. It was this government that implemented the statutory inquiry recommendations, and it is this government that has issued a national inquiry, and we will get on with supporting victims and girls.
Nick Goldman, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the whole House agrees that women's safety is of paramount importance. In my constituency of Chelmsford, the City Council has helped to develop a women's safety charter, with local premises pledging their commitment to a range of training of staff to consider and prioritise women's safety as standard. The evidence shows that overwhelming perpetrators of violence against women and girls are not strangers, as some may have us believe, but they are men already known to their victims. So would the Minister agree with me that women's safety will be addressed best not through stoking division and fear, but instead supporting and funding initiatives like Chelmsford City Councils, where the real work to protect women and girls is done?
Thank you. I totally agree with the Honourable Lady, and can I commend Chelmsford Council's work in this regard. If we're really going to halve the levels of violence against women and girls over the course of a decade, this isn't just going to be for government departments in Whitehall to tackle. This needs everyone across the country taking action. Local initiatives like the one in Chelmsford doing great work, and I encourage all local councils and local businesses to get involved to change that culture, to really drive forward what we need in order to tackle this abuse.
Rachel Bassett.
Question 5, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and data about tribunal cases will continue to be collected in the usual way. We know that disabled people are more likely to be impacted by unfair dismissals. Employees already have day one protections against discrimination, and recent developments in the Employment Rights Bill do not change that protection. This government is absolutely committed to supporting disabled people to thrive at work, including by introducing disability pay gap reporting and stronger flexible working rights.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the Equality Act applies, we know that workers are often made unfairly dismissed as a result of the limit coming in at 2 years currently, 1 year under the last Labour government, and we know we're reducing it to 6 months, but the risk of disabled workers, ethnic minority workers and young workers being dismissed still holds. So will the government monitor unfairly dismissed workers under 6 months to ensure that their protected characteristics are not a feature for dismissal?
I thank my honourable friend for her tireless campaigning on this important issue. It is right that we ensure disabled people are protected at work. She may also wish to approach the Ministry of Justice as the department which collects data on protected characteristics across employment tribunals.
Jim Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for that answer. Minister, many ladies, when they're dismissed unfairly, feel that they've been dismissed unfairly, whereas men would not have found themselves in that position. When it comes to equality, it's really important that ladies feel they get the same opportunity and the same fairness within the law. How can the Minister ensure that that happens for ladies, as against the present system, which seems to be unfairly dismissed towards them?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and he is absolutely right. Everybody should be able to feel able to work without fear of discrimination, and he is right that we must make sure, and we do make sure, that the law protects all.
Dr. Lauren Sullivan.
Number 6, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will answer questions 6 and 13 together. Gender equality isn't just the right thing to do, it is imperative to unlock growth. A 5% increase in female employment could boost the economy by up to £125 billion every year. That's why we're backing women in work and those starting businesses by supporting the Invest in Women Code, expanding access to flexible working, funding childcare for working families and ensuring employers have a plan to reduce their gender pay gap.
Thank you. In Gratian, we have some fantastic small businesses led by women across a diverse sector of businesses, such as House of Layla, Nels Caff, More Care Services, Enbridge Consulting, Mussolini's and For Girlies, alongside many more in Gratian. Will the Minister recognise the importance of women-led businesses to the local economy and economic empowerment and set out how this government is going to support women leaders thrive?
Mr Speaker, I'm very happy to join my honourable friend in recognising the fantastic women-led businesses in Gravesham and the impact that women-led businesses have on our communities and our economy. DBT's Venture Capital Unit has recently launched its second female founder cohort, and government-backed initiatives such as the Women's Business Council, FTSE Women Leaders and the Invest in Women's Task Force, whose first anniversary I was proud to join the Chancellor in marking yesterday, are making a difference to make sure that Britain is the best place for women to start or grow their businesses.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Danielle Stone, Northamptonshire's brilliant Police Fire Crime Commissioner, has just launched the Women's Charter, which brings together employers, community groups and the public sector to create safer workspaces for women across my constituency. Will the Minister join me in commending Danielle's work and set out what the government can do to encourage more partnerships like this across the UK?
Mr Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for sharing the work of the Northamptonshire Women's Charter and his commitment as well to tackling violence against women and girls. All employers have a duty to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace, and we're further strengthening this through the Employment Rights Bill. But statutory compliance on its own is not enough, and that's why we're engaging businesses, trade unions and civil society on improving workplace culture. Local initiatives like the Northamptonshire Charter are exactly the kind of partnership we want to see.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Minister not agree that women would be more empowered in the workspace or on the sports field if their changing space or their toilets were not invaded by biological males?
She will be aware of the Supreme Court judgment, which gave clarity on this, and we do expect that all providers will follow that ruling.
Alex Easton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Has the Minister considered using all the government's levers in female-dominated low-paid sectors, including operating the minimum wage and strengthening fair work standards in social care, early years and the cleaning industry?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The honourable member will be aware of the work that we are doing to make sure that we do support women in all ways that we can.
We come to stop it. Member Pettigill.
Number one, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This government is reinforcing our commitment to championing the rights of disabled people. This month we celebrate Disability History Month, and we mark the International Day of Persons with Disabilities last week. And this year also marks the 30th anniversary of the Disability Discrimination Act. We will continue our work to boost opportunities for disabled people, including through developing our plan for disability, which will outline our priorities for removing barriers for disabled people.
Mr Speaker, women in rural areas often have to travel long distances to reach a refuge, a police station or basic support services. What assessment has the Minister made of the impact these distances have on safety of victims of domestic abuse, and what action is being taken to close the rural support gap?
I do recognise the challenge that the Honourable Lady presents. That's why through the development of our Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, we've heard from victims in rural areas to understand what more is needed to make sure that they can access the services and the support that they need.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Western Isles Women's Aid in my constituency helped 180 women last year. Their refuge is working at capacity, yet their funding is uncertain. That's why my fundraiser on Friday will raise funds for the organisation. Mr Speaker, over 1,800 women reported domestic abuse in the Highlands 10 years ago. Last year the figure was closer to 2,800. Does the Minister agree that in rural and island communities it takes a lot of courage for women to report domestic abuse, even though, as we can see, the figures say there is no less incidence of domestic abuse.
I do agree with my honourable friend. It does take enormous courage to come forward, and there are additional barriers that women in rural communities can often experience. I do commend him for his fundraising efforts. Alongside that, we're investing more in support services for victims, and I hope that he will see when we publish our Violence Against Women and Girls strategy that we've heard directly from those living in rural communities to understand what more is needed to put in place the support they require.
Secretary of State Claire Coutinho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Jennifer Melley, a black nurse with a faultless record, was racially abused by a convicted paedophile for correctly referring to his biological sex in a medical context. She was called the N-word multiple times in her workplace, and yet she was the one who was punished by her NHS Trust and the Nursing and Midwifery Council, and she is still suspended from the job she loves 18 months later. Does the Secretary of State agree that the dedicated nurses who are being punished for asserting that biological sex is real are facing a gross injustice? And will she meet with Jennifer to hear her story?
I'm grateful to the right honourable lady. No one should face racist abuse or violence in any workplace, and that includes within the NHS. As we've also seen with the Sandy Peggy case, coming to these decisions in a timely manner is incredibly important. I hope this matter can be resolved as swiftly as possible, and I would of course be happy to meet with Jennifer to hear her experiences.
Claire Coutinho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the Secretary of State doing that. Now, does the Secretary of State believe that an 8-year-old child with autism can consent to a medical pathway that will leave them infertile and without sexual function for the rest of their life? If not, will she tell the Health Secretary herself to stop this puberty blocker experiment, which will biologically castrate children?
Mr. Speaker, we are implementing all of the recommendations of the CAS review. That also included establishing a clinical trial through the Pathways Trial Research Protocol, which has undergone a thorough independent review, has received all regulatory and ethical approvals. This was a recommendation that Baroness Cass brought forward, along with many others, and it's one that we are taking forward.
Russell.
Question number 5, Mr. Speaker. There is a massive problem with childcare for mothers doing PhDs. Even if you are fully funded for your university research, essentially by the government, you will not be eligible for free childcare hours. This affects both parents. The average PhD stipend is just £15,000 a year, but the average nursery place is £12,500 a year. Will the Minister look into this?
Mr. Speaker, I'd be happy to discuss this further with my honourable friend. We are committed to reviewing childcare support and making sure it is accessible and simple for families. Of course, PhD students are not eligible for some elements of support, but depending on income, may be eligible for certain hours. But also, student parents are eligible for the universal 15 hours of early free education, and this is available also to all 3- and 4-year-olds, regardless of family circumstances.
We now come to Prime Minister's questions. Sarah Aldey.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the whole House will join me in sending our deepest sympathy and condolences to the family and loved ones of Lance Corporal George Hooley of the Parachute Regiment, who died yesterday in Ukraine. Lance Corporal Hooley was injured in a tragic accident away from the front lines while observing Ukrainian forces testing a new defensive capability. His life was full of courage and determination. He served our country with honour and distinction around the world in the cause of freedom and democracy, including as part of the small number of British personnel in Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, I place his name on record today to express our gratitude and respect, and to affirm that his service will never be forgotten. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, on Monday I hosted President Zelensky, President Macron and Chancellor Merz in Downing Street. We must redouble our efforts. The UK, Europe and our allies will stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, stand up to Putin's aggression and work to deliver a just and lasting peace. Mr Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Sir Olney.
Mr. Speaker, a couple in my constituency fled persecution from the Egyptian authorities, who accused them of being traitors and terrorists due to their work as professional journalists. They gained refugee status here in 2021 and are now 3 months away from being eligible for indefinite leave to remain. The UK is their home, but their stability and family life are being threatened by changes in government policy. I'm concerned that the government has lost sight of the real-life impact that these changes will have on working families living here legally, and with details of transitional arrangements still under consultation, can the Prime Minister provide clarity regarding the transitional support available to families already on the pathway to indefinite leave to remain? Thank you.
Well, can I say this country will always be compassionate in relation to refugees and comply with our full obligations under the various conventions. It is important that we address some of the challenges we face at the moment, but we mustn't lose sight that we've always been a compassionate country that welcomes refugees to our shores.
Rachel Maskell.
Mr Speaker, while the last government was indifferent to child poverty, this government's driving mission must be to eradicate child poverty, and the strategy is a first step on that path. Over the first 1,001 critical days in pregnancy and early years, poverty contributes to malnourished babies, developmental delay, hypothermia and poor life outcomes. This is unacceptable. So will the Prime Minister lift pregnant women and babies out of poverty in York and across the country in this Parliament and ensure that we relieve poverty over the first 1,001 critical days?
Can I thank her for raising this? And I'm proud that babies born today will have a better start in life thanks to our decisions. Mr Speaker, I am particularly concerned by maternity services, and that's why we've commissioned a review so every mother is heard, gets proper care at what should be a special time, and currently too many are failed. We're funding healthy babies services in 75 of the most deprived areas, and we've taken action to save parents up to £500 a year on infant formula. It is a moral mission of this government to lift children out of poverty, and we intend to do so. The Leader of the Opposition thinks that maternity pay is excessive and would go back to the failment that puts hundreds of thousands of children into poverty.
Can be made and not the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And can I echo the sentiments of the Prime Minister? The thoughts of the whole House will rightly be with the family of Lance Corporal Hooley, who tragically died supporting Ukraine in her fight for freedom. Can the right honourable gentleman tell the House why are his own MPs describing him as a caretaker Prime Minister?
Mr Speaker, my own MPs are very proud we've just passed a budget which protected our public services and our NHS. No austerity which brought our NHS to the ground. We've created the conditions for economic stability with the headroom we need. And Mr Speaker, we're concentrating on the single most important issue for families up and down the country, which is the cost of living, by taking £150 off their energy bills. That's in addition to the £150 for the 6 million of the poorest households. We're concentrating on what matters to the country. She's trying to save her job.
Mr Speaker, let me answer the question for the Prime Minister. He's being called a caretaker because everyone can see that he's lost control of his party. And this lot, they're all so busy trying to replace him.
Order. Sorry. Can I just say the same people are making the same noises they made last week. I did say last week it wasn't the right time. I wouldn't do it this week. So please, let's not carry on with the way we left it last week. Kevin Baird,
Mr Speaker, they can make as much noise as they like. We all know that this lot are so busy trying to replace him that they've taken their eyes off the ball. Let's start, Mr Speaker. Wait for it. Let's start with the Energy Secretary, who wants to recycle himself as leader. He said he'd cut families' energy bills by £300. Can the Prime Minister tell the House how much have energy bills fallen by since the election?
Mr Speaker, I'm very pleased to say we're taking £150 off energy bills. I can also tell her I can also tell her that that's on top of the £150 we've taken off last year for the 3 million poorest families, now for 6 million poorest families. Mr. Speaker, she talks about leaving. The problem for us, last week,
Mr. May, I've told this side, I'll now tell this side. We don't need the pantomime auditions anymore, please.
Mr. Speaker, last week I pointed out that 3 of her ex-MPs went to reform. That included the former Deputy Chairman, Jonathan Gullis. He liked to think of himself as a straight talker. He said they're finished and they've lost the trust of the British people. In total, Mr. Speaker, 21 ex-Tory MPs have now left for reform. The real question, Mr. Speaker, is who's next? We can all see the Shadow Justice Secretary twitching after his come and get me plea from the member of Clacton. Mr. Speaker, we need no lessons from them.
Mr. Speaker, I asked him about energy bills. He could power the national grid on all of that hot air. He promised to cut energy bills by £300. Energy bills have risen by £187. But let's look at someone else who's making a mess. Let's look at the Education Secretary. Oh, there she is. Labour pledged to recruit 6,500 more teachers. So can the Prime Minister tell the House how many extra teachers are there since she became Education Secretary?
More than when they left office. I'm very proud to say so. We're in an upward trajectory. Oh, Mr. Speaker, they left our health service on its knees. They left our schools in a mess. They left our economy absolutely broken. They should be utterly ashamed of their record in service.
Wrong. Mr. Speaker, there are now 400 fewer teachers since she came into office. She's shaking her head. It's on the DFE website. Does she not check it once in a while? I can understand that the Right Honourable Lady is angry. We're all angry at the mess she's making. The Prime Minister doesn't know what's going on in energy. He doesn't know what's going on in education. Does he know anything about what's going on in the Home Office? Last year, the Prime Minister promised to recruit 13,000 more police officers. How's that going?
Prime Minister.
3,000 more by the end of March, and we're rising on police numbers. Mr. Speaker, they left the Home Office. The criminal justice system is utterly broken. Sir Brian Leveson has said on that. They lost control of our borders. They lost control of every single department. And she's obviously spent the morning rehearsing for the Liz Truss show. She's probably going to be the guest star next week. Both of them talking about how Liz Truss was 100% right. But what Liz Truss said was the Conservatives need to take... No, they don't want to hear it. The Conservatives need to take responsibility. The Conservatives need to take responsibility for their 14 years of failure. That was Liz Truss, their former leader. So perhaps she'll heed that, get up and say sorry.
Wrong again. I asked him how many police officers. There are now 1,300 fewer officers than at the election. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't know if the Home Secretary wants his job, but I do read that she's having conversations with Tony Blair because he's already given up on the Prime Minister. Why don't we talk about the Health Secretary? Let's see how he's doing. We do know he definitely wants the job. He said he'd end the doctor strikes. So can the Prime Minister tell the House how many appointments have been lost to strike action since last July?
Mr. Speaker, they left the NHS an absolute mess, with the highest waiting lists on record and the lowest confidence in the NHS ever. The Health Secretary said he would do 2 million extra appointments. He hasn't done 2 or 3 or 4. He's done 5 million extra appointments. That is because we invested in the NHS. What did they do? Having broken it, they voted against that investment. They should hang their heads in shame.
Mr. Speaker, I asked him how many appointments have been lost to strike action. He doesn't know. Let me tell him. We have lost 93,000 appointments to strikes since the Health Secretary gave doctors a massive pay rise. It's the truth. I know they wouldn't know the truth if it punched them in the face, but I'm telling them the truth. It is no wonder that we read this morning that the former Deputy Prime Minister has said about the Health Secretary she'd rather stick pins in her eyes than be on his golden ticket. And, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister congratulates himself on 5 million extra appointments. In our last year of office, we delivered 6.5 million extra appointments. Under Labour, Mr. Speaker, everything is getting worse. Jobs, bills, police numbers, teacher numbers, everything is getting worse. The Cabinet should be doing their own jobs. What are they doing? They're trying to compete for the caretaker's job. The only person who doesn't want the Prime Minister's job is the Chancellor. She's just trying to cling on to her own. Isn't it time, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister admits that Labour isn't working?
Mr. Speaker, she's living proof you can say whatever you like when nobody is listening to anything you have to say. There's absolutely no substance. She's no credibility on the economy. She still believes that Liz Truss was 100% right. She wants to go back to austerity with £47 billion of cuts. She thinks the minimum wage should be frozen too high. She's got no credibility on foreign policy. She complains about trade deals she tried to get and we got. She says that we should stay at home and not attend NATO or the G7. On issue after issue, she's clinging on to reform. That's not leadership, it's weakness. No wonder so many are leaving her party. They know there's absolutely no reason to stay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thousands of families are moving into new estates only to discover that basic infrastructure, roads, drains and sewers remain in limbo, unadopted by public authorities. In mid-Cheshire alone, 4,700 households, more than 12% of all properties in the constituency, face this uncertainty with no guarantee over maintenance, safety and future costs, often years after developers have walked away. Can the Prime Minister say what steps he will take to make adoption timely and enforceable so homeowners are not left carrying the burden of unfinished infrastructure?
Well, I thank him for raising this serious issue for his constituents and over 1.7 million homeowners across the country who are left at the mercy of unfair costs and poor management. I can confirm we're consulting on reforming this system to reduce private management of these estates and to protect more homeowners from unfair charges. That's a vital part of our leasehold reforms to protect homeowners from high cost and make sure everyone has the amenities that they need.
Sir Ed Davey, Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in offering our condolences to the family and friends of Lance Corporal George Hooley, who died on duty in Ukraine? Our thoughts and prayers are with them. Can I congratulate Glastonbury's Lando Norris on becoming the 11th British driver to win the Formula One World Championship, and also everyone at McLaren's in Woking who powered him to the title. Mr. Speaker, President Trump's new national security strategy is a deeply alarming document. Quite apart from the irony of President Trump accusing others of trampling on basic principles of democracy, it repeats far-right tropes of civilizational erasure and threatens that the US government will cultivate resistance in Europe. No wonder Vladimir Putin has welcomed that strategy. So will the Prime Minister pick up the phone and make it clear to President Trump that any attempts to interfere with our democracy are totally unacceptable?
Can I join him in congratulating Lando for the incredible win? I went down to Woking on Monday to see some of the team at McLaren, and they're all wearing the pride that brought with them. On the question of Europe and President Trump's comments, what I see is a strong Europe united behind Ukraine and united behind our long-standing values of freedom and democracy, and I will always stand up for those values and those freedoms.
Ed Davey.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't hear about standing up to President Trump. And if we're going to stand up to President Trump, we do need to strengthen our ties with Europe, not just on defence, but on the economy too. And the truth is, this government will not succeed unless it gets our economy growing strongly again. And the best way to do that is a customs union with Europe. The Prime Minister's chief economic advisor knows it. The Deputy Prime Minister knows it. And yesterday, the Labour chair of the Treasury Select Committee showed she knows it too when she backed our bill. Does the Prime Minister fear that if he keeps opposing a customs union, in 12 months' time, he will not be standing there?
Mr. Speaker, we have got a close relationship with the EU through our reset earlier this year. And yes, I do want a closer relationship than the one we've got at the moment. We are moving towards that. We do have manifesto commitments on issues such as single market, customs union and freedom of movement. But I would gently point this out, that having now done significant trade deals with other countries, including the US and India, which are hugely important to the JLR workforce and on pharma, it is not now sensible to unravel what is effectively the best deal with the US that any country has got.
Susan Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Working in NHS, I saw the consequences of Tory underinvestment in our health service. I welcome the progress under this Labour government, falling waiting lists, higher patient satisfaction with the general practice, and the rollout of neighbourhood health centres announced in the budget. I thank the frontline staff, including in mental health and community services, for all their hard work, and I am especially grateful to all the staff at the William Harvey Hospital in Ashford who turned up to work during the last BMA-led resident doctor strike and ensured that so many planned appointments went ahead. With rising hospital admissions because of flu and increased demand on A&E services, does the Prime Minister agree that the BMA should call off their next planned strike and instead work with the government to find a solution?
Mr. Speaker is right. Waiting lists are falling with over 5 million extra appointments. More people are being seen within 18 weeks, and we've hired 2,600 new GPs. That's real progress thanks to the hard work of NHS staff, backed by our record investment. I do think the strikes are unjustified, and they threaten that hard-won progress, and the focus should always be on patients.
Savile Roberts.
He just said, the Prime Minister, he wanted a closer relationship with Europe, but then referenced the Labour Party manifesto. Wales has been hardest hit by Brexit. Exports are down by a third. When will he admit that the only solution to the chaos imposed by Brexit is to rejoin the customs union and the single market, or is he too afraid of what his party might say?
Mr. Speaker, I went to Solihull to see the JLR workforce before we got the deal with President Trump. They were worried sick that they were going to lose their jobs, and that would be a loss for them, their families and their communities. I took the call from President Trump when we got the deal in Solihull in JLR, so the first people I could tell were the workforce, who knew very well that that meant their jobs were safeguarded. We've also just done a deal on pharma, which is the first of its kind in the world and the best of its kind in the world. It is not sensible or fair to the JLR workforce or to the pharma sector to say, having achieved those things now, we should unravel them by discussion about a customs union. I just don't think it's a sensible way to take our country forward.
Justine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of the almost 1 million young people not in education, employment or training, hundreds of thousands are disconnected from the system entirely. Youth workers have a unique ability to bridge young people into support. I wouldn't be stood here today if I hadn't been supported by a youth worker called Russell when I dropped out of school. So will the Prime Minister use the National Youth Strategy to deliver a shared long-term vision for young people's outcomes, with good work as a central pillar and youth workers and trusted adults at its heart?
Well, I thank him for his question. The party opposite presided over a lost decade for our young people. I'm determined to support every young person to reach their potential. That's why we're delivering the first national youth strategy for 15 years to transform youth services, backed by over £500 million. Mr. Speaker, that means more youth workers, more youth centres and a network of 50 young future hubs. That's on top of our youth job guarantee and our plan to create 50,000 more apprenticeships. We're building a Britain for the next generation.
Mr. Speaker, over the coming weeks, millions of people from across the country will be visiting their local church. Churches are the custodians of our history and do enormous good. But in January, the government announced a £19 million cut to the listed places of worship grant, as well as putting a cap on the repair cost. This cut puts thousands of local churches at risk. And I say to the Prime Minister, if we lose our churches, we lose the very soul and essence of our communities. So as we go into Christmas, will the Prime Minister do the right thing? He has 10 at risk in his own constituency. Will he reconsider this policy so that we can save our churches?
Mr. Speaker, we do support our churches and the work that those within our churches do, particularly in the lead up to Christmas, and I've got a reception for them in Downing Street this very afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before May's election, Reform in Kent promised that they would improve services and cut taxes. Instead, vital services to older people and those with a mental health condition provided by great organisations like Imago and Involve is to be cut and taxes are going up. Would the Prime Minister agree with me on two things? That given the additional money for the county through the Fair Funding Review, it's beyond belief that Kent are cutting services that vulnerable people rely on, and that their so-called Doge unit that we were told would eliminate waste actually stands for deluded, overconfident, gormless and embarrassing.
Well, it sums up very well how his community have been utterly let down by Reform. Whilst the member for Clacton is making excuses about his behaviour at school, look at what his party are doing across the country. Chaos in Kent. In Hampshire, their mayoral candidate says the Deputy Prime Minister, a black British man born in this country, should go back to the Caribbean. In Staffordshire, Reform's leader has been exposed as a white supremacist. It's not a coincidence, Mr. Speaker, because chaos and division is a member of Clacton's life work.
We're a hobos.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Bath, parents of children with special educational needs, often very complex needs, are crying out for special school places. Funding to build a brand new special school at that Culver Hayes site in Bath was secured, but the government has frozen the funding for almost 18 months without any explanation, leaving many families in the lurch. How much longer do families and children with special educational needs have to wait for this vital new school?
Well, I thank you for raising this, and we are working closely with local authorities on plans for special and alternative provision-free schools. We are keen to progress this, and I'll make sure that ministers update her in her particular case. But we are determined to fix the SEND system that fails parents and fails children, and that's why we've launched a national conversation to put families at the heart of the lasting reform. We've already put money into extra new places, a language support and Best Start family hubs being rolled out across every area from April.
Christine Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Blackburn, West Lothian, St Kentigern's Academy was part demolished due to wrack and is being rebuilt, costing £35 million. West Lothian Council found £20 million from its own stretched budget, but despite repeated pleas to the Scottish Cabinet Secretary for Education, who called it the most deserving case, funding has not been delivered. Will the Prime Minister back my call for the Scottish Government to urgently fund the £15 million shortfall and raise it with the First Minister in their next meeting?
Well, can I thank her, because she's fought for her constituents on this issue for years, and meanwhile decades of SNP cuts and broken promises have left schools crumbling. Mr. Speaker, what a contrast. By the end of this Parliament, every school in England will either be rack-free or we will rebuild them entirely. we delivered the largest settlement for the Scottish Government in the history of devolution. So the question for the SNP is, after decades of decline, what is their excuse?
Dr. Luke Evans.
Mr. Speaker, I feel for the Prime Minister. It must be tough wherever he goes in the UK because of his policies. A pub, higher taxes. A restaurant, higher taxes. A cafe, higher taxes. A farm, higher taxes. A GP, higher taxes. A care home, higher taxes. A hospice, higher taxes. So, Mr. Speaker, is this the reason the Prime Minister chooses to spend so much time out of this country?
What a load of nonsense. Mr. Speaker, we are at a critical stage in progress in Ukraine that will affect Ukraine's sovereignty, the whole of Europe, and the values that we hold dear. We are part of one of the leading countries to strengthen NATO at a vital time for defence and security in Europe. And we've secured trade deals that they tried for years to achieve, but never did because of our international engagement. And we've got better relations with the EU, all of which is good for our country. Ridiculous question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The video games company Rockstar in my constituency last month fired 31 employees without providing evidence or union representation. The IWGB alleges union busting. Having met Rockstar, they failed to reassure me they are following employment law, and I share concerns about union busting. Given this government is responsible for the biggest increase in workers' rights in a generation, does the Prime Minister agree all companies, regardless of profit size, must follow UK employment law and all workers have the right to join a union?
Well, it's a deeply concerning case. Every worker has the right to join a trade union, and we're determined to strengthen workers' rights and ensure they don't face unfair consequences for being part of a union. Ministers will look into the particular case that he raises and keep him updated.
Blake Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Digital ID is intrusive and fundamentally un-British. The government has no mandate for it. No sensible person believes it will tackle illegal immigration or illegal working. It's an attack on our open society and a staggering waste of taxpayers' money, isn't it?
Digital ID has huge benefits, as many countries in Europe are already demonstrating. And where they failed on our borders, we're taking control of our borders, and I'm proud that we're doing so.
Jenny Riddle-Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister will know that SEND is in crisis across the country, but it's in particular crisis in Suffolk, where the County Council is in special measures for its failings. I'm delighted that the government has listened to one of my asks, which is to have a national conversation about SEND, so parents, young people and their advocates can have their voices heard. Will the Prime Minister back my call to make sure that we deliver the funding for the former Saxmundham Set School in Saxmundham that closed its doors for the last time in 2024?
Can I thank her? I know she's a dedicated campaigner on this issue, and I'll make sure ministers update her on the latest progress in her constituency. Our ambition is to make sure all children with SEND have access to the right support. That's why we're working closely with local authorities to deliver places where they're needed most.
Sarah Bull.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government is always talking about the fair choices that it has made. But is it a fair choice to balloon the benefits bill? Is it a fair choice to introduce an unfunded and unwanted digital ID that will cost the public billions? And is it a fair choice to increase taxes on working people when the promise was not to? The answer, Mr. Speaker, is no. So can I ask the Prime Minister to consider one final... So can I ask the Prime Minister to give one final fair choice, thinking of food security and to avoid devastation for families across the country and reverse the family farm tax?
Mr. Speaker, welfare ballooned on their watch. When the Shadow Chancellor was responsible for welfare, it ballooned by £33 billion. They left a £22 billion black hole. The OBR reviewed and said they added £16 billion to that. We'll take no lecture from them on the economy.
Final question, Carl Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's no denying that this government inherited a crisis in our criminal courts, with the number of cases waiting to be tried growing every single day. So if the Justice Secretary plan to do away with jury trials in some cases, not all, in some cases, is really about addressing the backlog and getting the position to something manageable, then why isn't there a sunset clause? And why has that been ruled out?
Well, he's absolutely right to draw attention to the crisis in our courts. Yes, he says. Yes, he says. Sir Brian Leveson is one of our most respected senior judges. He did an independent report, and he made clear that we risk, in his words, total collapse of the criminal justice system without change. That is what they're chuntering at. That is what they left. A system near total collapse, where victims of sexual violence and rape wait years to get justice. That is not justice, that is victims failed. I can reassure him, and I know he feels very strongly on this, that juries will remain a cornerstone of our justice system for the most serious cases.
Mr Robertson, I don't want shouting like that again. Do we understand each other? Okay. Right. That completes Prime Minister's questions. Yeah. Point of order, Rachel Blake.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. The Shadow Home Secretary has visited my constituency to make a political video for social media. He's undertaken videoed interviews with apparently no reference to the services available to tackle the issues that he's seeking to highlight. Mr. Speaker, I cannot accept his attempt to use the communities in Westminster and the City as a political football, and since before I was elected, I've campaigned for more local police officers and specialist outreach workers to tackle the very specific issues we're facing locally. And following my campaigning, the government has invested an additional £12 million into Westminster.
I think we got the message. You're absolutely right with the first part. No, you don't go into full detail. You've made the point of order. The point of order is about somebody coming into another person's constituency. The answer is clear. Whichever side of the House you're on, whichever party you might represent, you have to allow the Member of Parliament notice that you are coming in. We've had it before, we don't need it, we're quite a long way for general election, so I am disappointed. You should always be informed of somebody coming in. Please, respect each other. Point of order, John MacDonald.
I don't like doing this, Mr. Speaker, but I have to. I wrote on behalf of several members to the Secretary of State for Justice last Wednesday. It is in relation to the hunger strike that's taking place within our prisons at the moment by Palestine Action prisoners, some of whom now have been hospitalised. We wrote simply asking for a meeting with the Secretary of State. We've not received any response. I informed his office yesterday I'd be raising a point of order. We gave it another day. We still haven't had a response to that letter. This is a matter of urgency, and I would have expected at least the courtesy of some response, even if he's not willing to meet us.
Can I first of all say I thank the Honourable Member for raising his point. I always expect ministers to take seriously correspondence from members, whichever side of the House. It is totally unacceptable. Not if I can't make a meeting happen, but I do expect people's correspondence to be dealt with quickly and effectively. What I would say is the Treasury bench, I hope, will be listening very carefully, and I hope that we'll make contact with the Honourable Member. It is, as I said, not acceptable. I'm getting more and more people complaining about ministerial correspondence. We even heard of one that took 12 months. It's not good enough. It's not acceptable. The ministerial teams need to get their act together and make sure members of Parliament, quite rightly, get a reply timely. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you for what you just said in response to the point of order from the member for Hayes and Harlington. Is there any way that you could ensure that a minister comes to this House to give a statement about the hunger strikers in the prison? I visited one of them yesterday, and I am deeply concerned about what is going on in our prisons, where people are being held for an inordinate length of time on remand when they are being delayed their access to justice.
I cannot guarantee I'm not responsible for what goes on within this chamber. I'm here to keep good order. What I would say is, quite rightly, as another senior member raising a point of order, the Treasury bench will have hoped they would that. Who knows? It might be there are different ways, and you both know how to do it, in order to ensure that this is brought to the attention of the chamber. I will leave that with you, knowing, with the experience between you, I'd hate to add up how many years, but I think between you, you know the answer to the question. Right. Point of order, Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've looked through the agenda up until Christmas, and it appears that there is no opportunity for members to question either the police settlement or the local government settlement. Normally, there is a debate held, or at least a statement given on the floor of the House about both of these, so that members are able to question those. I understand that it seems to be the government's intention to put a written ministerial statement about this on the last day of Parliament, not giving us an opportunity to challenge. Given that local authorities are finalising their budgets for next year at the moment, they need to know how much funding they're going to get from the government. So could you use your good offices to encourage the government to actually come forward with at least a statement?
Can I just say, quite rightly, the point has been raised. Once again, I expect the Treasury bench to have taken it over. What I would say, as I said previously, there are other mechanisms that you may wish to consider using. I could see the shock horror of the opposition chief whip when you said it. You know, I was absolutely overwhelmed by the shock that came out. But allowing that to rest, I do take seriously. This House should hear it. A WMS is not the answer on something so serious. So let me say, Treasury bench should have heard it. We shouldn't shy away from this House. In fact, we should always come to the House first. I can't say it more than what I do. At some point, I would suggest once again that the ministerial code needs to be changed if people aren't going to take it seriously. Right, on that, we will now lead it. We've now got presentation of bill. Sarah Dyke.
Reindeer licensing for exhibition bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 16th of January 2026.
Friday the 16th of January 2026. Thank you. Right, we now come to the 10-minute rule motion. Katie Lamb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision about the collection and publication of data on immigration status, nationality and country of birth of certain persons relating to users of certain public services, claimants of certain benefits, the prison population and arrests, to require that such data is published at least once per calendar year, to require the Secretary of State to review the quality and consistency of any such data collected and published, and for connected purposes. I firmly believe that for nearly 3 decades, migration to this country has been too high and remains so. Every election-winning manifesto since 1974 has promised to reduce migration. And yet, since 1997, with the unsurprising exception of 2020, net migration has run at more than 100,000 people per year. Like governments before it, the last government promised to reduce migration. As my right honourable friend, the member for North West Essex, has said, it failed to do so. To paraphrase my honourable friend, the member for West Suffolk, mass migration is the single biggest broken promise in British politics and the single biggest reason that trust in our politics is in such short supply. But whatever we believe, it is an objective fact that our national conversation around immigration is often hampered by shockingly poor data, when that data even exists at all. My honourable friend, the member for Harborough, Oadby and Wigston, has worked for years to highlight this problem.
As the Migration Observatory, a group of academics at the University of Oxford, noted just last week, migration data is plagued by gaps and quality issues which reflect structural and long-term problems with data silos, disorganised databases and failures to keep complete records. All in all, the Migration Observatory identified 10 areas of public policy which a lack of high-quality migration data is currently undermining. All of this starts with the fundamental question: how many people are in this country and who are they? And the truth is that we do not know. Remarkably, the United Kingdom does not have a proper system of entry and exit checks. We do not record the number of people actually arriving in the country or the number of people actually leaving. The migration figures that we see published every year are just best guesses.
Exactly.
When people do arrive here, we don't have comprehensive data on exactly where they've come from or where in the country they might be moving to. Our best guess for this comes once a decade at the census, but given the scale and pace of migration since the last census in 2021, this information will now almost certainly be hopelessly out of date. Recently, we saw the Office for National Statistics issue new figures on net migration for 2024. Using these new methods, the ONS now thinks that emigration of British nationals had been underestimated by 2/3 of a million people between 2021 and 2024. For years, policy in this country was made on the basis of the old guess, which showed British national immigration running at below average. These new figures invite serious questions about why so many British nationals, the vast majority of them young, are leaving this country. And yet, for years, the official data showed that there was no such problem, and so the conversation in this place never proceeded beyond the level of anecdote. When people do arrive here, we know far too little about them. We don't know the number of foreign criminals who've been awarded visas since 2021 or where they've come from. We don't have the full information on how many people move between the asylum system and the formal legal migration system. In the case of EU migrants, we don't know why these people are coming here or how many of them already have EU settled status. All of this concerns into this country. When it comes to of migrants who are already here, our understanding is even worse. 2020, data about income tax and national insurance contributions broken down by nationality. We have no such data by visa type. Little data on the of migrants by immigrant type or nationality following the collapse of the labour force survey. We don't know the immigration status of benefits claimants and universal credit, which makes up about half of our working age benefit spend. When it comes to universal credit, we don't have detailed nationality data on claimants. We don't know how much migrants are costing this country in legal aid or in translation of eligible foreign nationals are receiving. Total cost in any definition of migrants pre and post indefinite leave to remain state, number of people arrested by nationality, the immigration status of prisoners, or the number of people sentenced but not imprisoned by nationality. The indicative data that we do have about migrant crime has been obtained via Freedom of Information Act requests and is often incomplete or disputed. Because it is not released on a consistent basis, it is also very hard to assess over time. Yet, in the absence of any alternative, this is the basis on which we must conduct the debate. We have no information at all on the nationality or immigration status of those referred to prevent, a glaring gap in our ability to combat extremism. And all this, everything that I've said, relates only to the UK's legal population. We do not have, and have not had for some time, a credible estimated figure about the number of people who are in this country illegally. There has been no official attempt to combine data sets we could use, utility usage, health restrictions, census data, grocery purchases, to establish this number. So we cannot know what pressure this might be putting on public services or on infrastructure, and we cannot properly assess how much money needs to be invested into our border force and immigration enforcement. We don't have any information about internal deportation targets within immigration enforcement and border force and what proportion of those targets are being met. We don't know what happens to asylum seekers who've been refused asylum but have not been returned to their home countries. We don't know how often and in what context human rights-based claims are made to thwart removal and how often those claims are successful, particularly as we don't yet have access to the judgments of the first-tier immigration tribunal. How can we possibly have a well-informed conversation about illegal migration without a full understanding of the facts? Those of us who wish to end the era of mass migration are often the loudest voices in calling for more data. Yet those who believe that this period of mass migration has been a good thing for our country should be the biggest supporters of more comprehensive and accurate data on the impact of migration. We are often told, including in this House, that the British people have been misled or misinformed about the true impact of immigration on our country, that mass migration has in fact been better for this country than many believe. If that is the case, then let us see it in the data. If, as many members on the benches opposite and to my left may claim, the majority of migrants are a net fiscal positive, then let us see it in the data. If, in fact, migrants are no more likely to commit crime than British nationals, then let us see it in the data. Based on the indicative data that we do have, I believe this is exceedingly unlikely. But until we have access to the full facts, the conversation about migration in this place and across our country will necessarily fall short. There is no good reason to oppose a better informed national conversation around immigration. More data and evidence would allow us to make better decisions about who should be allowed to come to and stay in our country and in what numbers. It would allow us to truthfully assess the impact of different migrant groups, moving us on from generalisations about the whole of migration and towards a more productive conversation about the relative contributions of specific migrant groups by nationality and visa type. And most importantly of all, it would provide transparency for the British people and enable more detailed scrutiny of any government's policy on migration. In countries like Denmark, where migrant contribution data is published regularly, the government trusts its citizens to consider the data, consider their policies, and, in turn, to make up their own minds about whether or not they support the action being taken. After decades of broken promises, this is the very least the British people deserve: the right and ability to scrutinise in full the migration policy of their elected government. I sincerely hope that ministers in the Home Office and across government will recognise this and will work with the ONS to produce a more comprehensive and accurate data set in the years ahead. Immigration policy cannot be set in isolation. The people living in this country are this country, and so the flow of people coming here necessarily has an impact on every area of our lives. Governments do not exist independently of the nations that they govern, and nations do not exist independently of the people who constitute them. They are, wholly and entirely, a result of those people, their collective contributions and their collective failings. Immigration policy, therefore, is upstream of our public finances, the health of our public services, the cost of housing, the quality of our schools, the population of our prisons, the cohesion of our communities, and the strength of our democracy. The very least that we can do when discussing an issue of such enormous importance is to ensure that public policy is properly informed by the full facts.
The honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare to bring in the bill?
Neil O'Brien, Chris Philp, Claire Coutinho, Matt Vickers, Sarah Ball, Lewis Cocking, Jack Rankin, Harriet Cross, Peter Bedford, Andrew Snowden, Bradley Thomas, and myself, Mr. Speaker.
Katie Lamb.
Data Publication and Quality, Immigration, Nationality and Country of Birth Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 16th of January.
Friday the 16th of January. We now come to the Opposition Day motion on seasonal work. I inform the House that I have selected the amendment tabled in the name of the Prime Minister. I now call the opposition spokesperson to move the motion. Nigel Huddleston.
Thank you, and I beg to move the motion as stated on the order paper in my name and others, Mr. Speaker. Last year's budget, with its increases in national insurance, increases in business rates and inflation-busting pay rises, led to more than 180,000 job losses because it increased the cost of labour. Most economists, and indeed most sensible people, understand that when you increase the price of something, there is less demand for it. By increasing the cost of jobs, Labour caused unemployment. And yet this year, fully aware of rising unemployment, the Chancellor remarkably came back for more. And with her colleagues in the Cabinet, she is imposing even more costs on business through the unemployment bill, with more regulations and a whole new set of taxes, like the tourism tax. These decisions will do even more damage, snatching the opportunity of a first job, a seasonal job, or an entire career from young people and indeed people of all ages. Yes, indeed.
Particularly on the tourism tax, there was a question I posed to the government only a couple of months ago when the Minister said, and I quote, that we think they've been taxed enough. Is it a surprise to this side of the House, then, that we see a tourism tax is being brought forward?
Yes, indeed, my honourable friend's making an important point, because I was here to hear that. Not only did he say there were no plans to bring in a tax, but clearly there were, because a few weeks later one was brought in. But he did say that the sector's been taxed enough. Well, I agree with that, Minister. I don't, therefore, agree with the Chancellor. Now, of course, not content with the damage to businesses and jobs done in last year's budget, the Chancellor this year decided to go even further in her latest budget and went for the pockets of working people directly by making them pay more tax, a clear manifesto breach. Working people are paying the price for this government's inability to tackle the ballooning welfare bill and their inability to control their unions and their backbenchers. The budget wasn't about the economy, it was all about internal party management. It is appalling that we have a Chancellor who appears to be willing to see thousands of our constituents losing their jobs, as long as she saves hers. In short, the budget was a £26 billion tax hike on working people in order to pay for Labour's welfare spending. Last year's budget destroyed jobs. This latest one disincentivised work. It takes a special kind of incompetence to destabilise both the demand and the supply of labour simultaneously. But this government has somehow managed to do just that. Indeed.
Right, Honourable Member, isn't the truth here that we have a government that's got no business experience and thinks that you can simply push the costs down to business, squeeze and squeeze them, and they'll pass the prices on to customers? They'll have no customers, there'll be no businesses, there'll be no jobs.
Absolutely, my right honourable friend's making a really important point. It's quite remarkable following the budget to hear Labour MPs go to their constituents saying, oh, we've helped you out, we've reduced the costs. Talk to them, they'll find it was the very opposite of that.
Will you give way briefly on that point?
Yep.
I thank the Shadow Secretary of State for giving way. He, like me, will have been out in our constituency speaking to small businesses, and I'm sure Labour MPs would have been over the weekend too. A local publican told me that she was going to have to lay off staff in January because of the extra taxes that this Chancellor came back for, more taxes that she said she wouldn't do since the last budget. I just wonder whether the Shadow Secretary of State had those experiences in hospitality businesses that employ particularly young people.
Sir Secretary of State.
Yes, my honourable friend again is absolutely correct. The hospitality sector has been particularly hard hit by Labour's damaging economic policies. Many of us out on Small Business Saturday spoke to many of those businesses, and unfortunately, I think UK hospitality fear that there could be a further 100,000 job losses because of their policies.
Yes.
I'm
most grateful to him. Could I draw his attention to Matt Allam, who runs the Cricketers and two other pubs in my constituency, who is devastated by this budget, having been clobbered last year with the NIC increases, but that our policy of relieving smaller businesses and high street businesses of business rates would make all the difference. And could you persuade the government to adopt that policy in this debate?
Well, exactly. I suspect suspect during today's debate we'll hear many names of great pubs. I'll try and visit as many of them as I can, as long as they still survive, indeed. But he is absolutely right. There is an alternative course of action here. There is a conservative, pro-business economic policy that we can advocate. And I'll come on to some of the numbers later on in my speech and show the appalling impact, in particular, on pubs. So, certainly, yeah.
Honourable gentleman for giving way. And yes, I was out, like many, I'm sure, of my colleagues on these benches, talking to small high street businesses in my constituency in Saltaire specifically. And for many of them, the permanent reduction in business rate announced by the Chancellor is very welcome, and they are not hit by property revaluations and will be getting reductions in their business rates and welcome the levelling of the playing field with the online giants. How would he be proposing to pay for his party's unfunded proposals?
Yeah, I suggest the Honourable Lady talk to those constituents again, and I don't think you have to be a sparkling economist to work out that when something's gone up, it's higher. It's not lower. They're not getting a permanent reduction in business rates. The numbers are going up. That's basic economics and facts. And of course, I'll just make a little bit of progress and then I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman. So in its part-time, seasonal and temporary workers, young workers and people in sectors such as food production, tourism, retail and hospitality are particularly being hit. But we perhaps should not be surprised for this, as many honourable members have already pointed out. Labour just don't understand economics, they don't understand business and they don't understand incentives. I'll give way to my honourable friend first of all.
Can I thank the Minister for bringing this forward? This is an incredibly important debate, and government, with respect to government, has a lot to answer in the points that are put forward. Can I put a point on the Northern Ireland agri-food sector in particular? The licensing process, how they bring people in, is so laborious. It's putting people off. It means that when we need the workers in the agri-food sector, we're not getting them. So the Honourable Gentleman is right to put forward the case for hospitality. Can I put forward the case for the Northern Ireland agri-food sector, who are also under great pressure, and this system from government will disadvantage them?
Absolutely. The Honourable Gentleman is making a really important point here because, of course, we see the particular hard hit where the numbers are easily available in the hospitality sector, and there's a lot of reports gone out about the job losses there. But the whole sectors, multiple sectors, will be hit by these changes. The Honourable Gentleman has also pointed out it's not just the tax hit, it's the regulatory burden. And as I just reinstates this point, this government doesn't understand business. Yes.
Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do thank you for giving way. In 2023, just under 4,600 licensed premises closed down right across the UK. Was the 2024 Labour budget to blame for that?
No, the pandemic was largely to blame for that, which is precisely why, in order to recover from the pandemic, this government's spent £400 billion to help save lives and livelihoods, including supporting the hospitality sector. So I'm afraid I don't accept the premise there. Now, few members of the Cabinet, of course, have ever worked in the private sector, and I don't think any of them have actually run their own business. Maybe one. The Honourable Gentleman, perhaps he can correct me.
Party opposite will know my background and work career, because I mentioned I used to be a teacher every single time. I would just ask the gentleman to consider the fact that many members of his party talk about education and they haven't been teachers. Would he not recognise that actually, as members of Parliament, we come here taking with us the experience of people that we speak to? He spoke about the fact that members opposite get out and speak to businesses. Would he not recognise that we come to this House with the experiences of those people we represent? So the argument that because we haven't ever worked in a business that we can't talk about business is a nonsense.
Chris, you may not have to work in business, but I do expect every member of Parliament to come to this House and advocate for business. Yes, good one.
It was a wonderful scene, as my honourable friend will remember, to see the King and the President of the United States sit down at the Windsor only recently. And what was particularly striking was on the British side, only the King had run a business. He ran the Duchy of Cornwall. Nobody else had run a business. On the American side, everybody had run a business. Isn't that quite a stark identification?
Absolutely. And I think the right honourable gentleman, again, is correct. You know, having people who run a business is good for government. I'm sorry to hear the honourable members opposite don't believe that their cabinet would be better if there were a few more pro-business people in them. I can assure him most of his constituents agree so. I'll give way. Yeah.
I do thank the honourable gentleman. I do have some affection for him. And he had a lovely smile. But on that same point, can you tell me how many members of the Shadow Cabinet, or indeed any one of the opposition MPs who serve on their front bench, have ever had to sustain a long-term position on a low-paid, insecure work, raising a family? Because those voices are equally important in this debate.
I have a great deal of affection for the honourable gentleman as well. We go back quite a long way from when we were elected. I will tell him, and it's one thing that actually I think on both sides of this House we do need to recognise. There are people on both sides of this House who come from quite poor backgrounds, from modest backgrounds, and actually trying to play that as if this benches are all full of posh people and the opposition benches are not, is simply not true. And I think the honourable gentleman is doing disservice to the House to try and give an alternative impression. Yes.
One state school boy to another state school boy, and the first of our families to go to university. Would you agree with me that we all have gaps in our knowledge, understanding and experience? But the way that you fill them is that you ask the people who practice in that sector, listen to what they have to say, don't just tell them they're wrong, that you're right because you're the government, and change when the facts urge a change upon you.
Again, the honourable gentleman put it incredibly well, and to say it's the onus of all of us in this place to make sure we do listen, we do learn, and we advocate on behalf of those who are making. I'll give way one more time, and then I'll make a little bit of progress. Yeah.
Antonia Banks. Thank the honourable member for giving way, and I think with affection the times that we've sat together on the Politics Midlands sofa while we're being nice to the honourable member. I wonder if he would tell us, for the benefit of the House, how many 0 hours workers he's spoken to in the preparation of his speech today.
Go on, sir.
Yeah, I've spoken to a few 0 hour workers, and I can tell you many of them are not happy with the policy because you're going to make some of them unemployed. Right. So, as I said, Mr. Speaker, the one thing that we do know about Labour, of course, is that they do know how to spend other people's money. They just have no idea how it's created, how wealth is created, how the money that pays for our public services is generated in the first place. But they certainly know how to tax and spend. We've seen tax increases of £66 billion in just 2 budgets and tens of billions of pounds in additional debt. As Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. I'll give way to
very well. I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. Members, honourable members on the opposition.
Sorry, Mr. Hall, your voice is carrying, and I don't need to hear it.
It didn't carry all the way to me.
Did it carry to me? That's why I'm defending your
speech. Exactly, Mr. Speaker. The honourable gentleman and honourable and right honourable members on the opposition benches often talk about wealth creators. Now, of course, business people are wealth creators. Entrepreneurs are wealth creators. But would you agree with me that wealth is also created by the public services that we need, by the infrastructure that we need, and that has to be paid for?
I think the honourable gentleman, how are they paid for? The top 1% of income taxpayers in this country pay 29% of all income tax. There are estimates that Labour government policies have led to 16,000 of the wealthiest people in this country leaving. That's the equivalent of 1/3 to 500,000 of average taxpayers. The burden, therefore, is spread on the others. So instead of demonising some of the wealthiest people who pay incredibly and make an incredible contribution towards our public services, maybe they should thank them instead.
It's not just the wealthy people who have left as well. We know from the ONS data that 257,000 Brits have gone when it was supposed to be estimated at 70,000, of which about 2/3 to 3/4 were under the age of 35. So we are losing young people to the rest of the world because of the implications of not being able to get a job in this country.
The Secretary of State.
Yes, yet more common sense coming from this side of the chamber. I agree with the honourable gentleman. And of course, it's young people in particular who do not have confidence in this government and are fleeing. Mr. Speaker, it's quite clear I don't have a particularly high regard for Labour's economic competence, but even I didn't expect them to be running out of money quite so quickly. I expected them to be bad. I didn't expect them to be this bad. And it doesn't give me any joy or political joy to say that, because it's our constituents, my constituents, their constituents who are paying the price for Labour's incompetence, with higher taxes and in many cases with their jobs and livelihoods. I genuinely wish they were better at government. But that is wishful thinking, because here's another hard truth about Labour. Despite the party's name, despite the false advocacy for working people, every Labour government since the Second World War has left office with unemployment higher than when they started. Every one, always leaving the Conservatives to clear up their mess. While we Conservatives know the best thing you can do for working people, the best thing you can do to lift people out of poverty is help them get a job, and the Conservatives have a far, far better record than Labour in doing that. Between 2010 and 2024, the Conservative-led governments oversaw the creation of 4 million jobs. That's an average of 800 a day, Mr. Speaker. This government is destroying them by the tune of hundreds of jobs per day.
I thank the Shadow Secretary of State for giving way. Well, we know what the government wants to do to support tourism and hospitality. It wants to get those on welfare to work in that sector, despite the fact some of those on welfare are there because the government has taxed tourism and welfare. Does he think that's socialism or incompetence?
I think the honourable gentleman knows what my answer to that is. The irony, it would be laughable if it wasn't so sad, of the policy that they announced over the weekend to put government subsidies into creating jobs when actually they could do a better job at running the economy and they would be created themselves. It's something I will come on to again in a moment. Mr. Speaker, in terms of the record of the last government, of course, we also took millions of people out of paying income tax. We increased the tax-free allowance from £6,475 that we inherited under Labour to £12,570. And as soon as we were in a position, following the pandemic, to start reducing taxes, that's exactly what we did. Reduce the national insurance on workers from 12% to 10%, and then again from 10% to 8%, with a plan to eliminate employee national insurance altogether and, of course, align the thresholds. Labour talked about backing business when in opposition, but they're doing no such thing in government. In the budget, the Chancellor had the brass neck to say she was helping the hospitality industry with business rates. In reality, hotels, pubs, theme parks, restaurants, cafes, all seeing an increase in their business rates, as are the wider retail and leisure sectors. Investment in hospitality and tourism is already being paused or diverted overseas due to the UK's rising costs and regulatory environment. I'll give way.
I thank my honourable friend, Shadow Secretary of State, for giving way. Is he as concerned as I am that a typical pub in my constituency is paying around £2,500 per month more in cost compared to 12 months ago? And just to put this briefly into context, to cover those costs, assuming a couple go in and spend £100, that's 25 additional sittings that they've got to clear, that they've got a seat just to clear their costs. How are these going to survive?
Yeah. Well, my honourable friend and neighbour is absolutely right, and I think the equivalent increase in the cost for the average pub over the next few years, and I do have the figures I'll come into in a minute, is the equivalent of needing to serve an extra 10,000 pints. How many pubs are going to be able to do that? Yes.
I'm very grateful to the Shadow Secretary of State for giving way. Epping Forest is home to some wonderful pubs and hospitality businesses like the Bull and the Queen Vic in Thaden Boys, the Thaden Oak and Mila in Loughton. I hope he'll join me in congratulating them in reaching the finalists of the British Kebab Awards next year. But does he agree with me that it's only with the Conservatives' approach of scrapping business rates and supporting our high streets and these fantastic businesses that these businesses will be able to survive and then thrive in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. The honourable gentleman, again, a great advocate for the hospitality and leisure sector, and indeed there is an alternative. There are alternative approaches to back business and enable them to succeed and generate taxes and employment. He's absolutely right, and congratulate them on the Kebab Awards as well. As a big fan of kebabs, I'll have to make a visit at some point. Now, yes.
I'm very grateful to the Shadow Secretary of State for giving way. Does he agree that this budget, the last one, has been a hammer blow to our already flagging high streets? And does he also recognise that the only retail premises that can be exempted from business rates currently are those that are listed, if they're unoccupied, and that introduces perverse consequences for the tone and texture of our high streets? And by abolishing business rates, we will remove that perversity and the look and feel of our high streets and the vibrancy of our high streets should be improved.
Yes, the right honourable gentleman again is correct, and of course it's not just the tax policies but the wraparound, the devil in the detail of what can and cannot be included in various exemptions that causes some perhaps unintended or indeed intended consequences, and I think we all care very much about the future of our high streets, which is exactly why at conference we announced the retail, hospitality and leisure relief that we did. Now, as I said, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the budget, as I said, the Honourable Lady, the Right Honourable Lady, the Chancellor, had the brass neck to say she was helping the hospitality industry with business rates. They were doing no such thing. As I said, they're increasing the business rates considerably. And while hospitality is the UK's largest employer of 16 to 24-year-olds, these cost pressures directly threaten, in particular, youth employment. New analysis from the UK Hospitality reveals that small hospitality venues alone will see business rates rises by £318 million over 3 years, and subsectors like the often mentioned in this debate pubs will see a whopping increase. The average pub's business rates, even with the reduced multiplier and transitional relief, will increase 15% next year. That's an extra £1,400. In 27-28, an average pub's rates will be £4,500 higher, and 28-29, £7,000 higher. In total, over 3 years, the average pub will pay an extra £12,900, and an average hotel will be paying an extra £28,900 in rates next year. In 27-28, it will be £65,000 higher, and in 28-29, £111,000 higher. In total, over 3 years, an average hotel's rates bill will increase by over £200,000, just in time, no doubt, for them to also face the dreaded new tourism tax. And Labour's unemployment bill will do nothing but impose thousands of pounds in extra costs on businesses across the country, not to mention, of course, the ricochet impact on temporary and seasonal jobs. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
I thank the Shadow Secretary of State for giving way. On the point of the tourism tax, which potentially will come on top of the increase in business rates, I spoke to Catherine from the Navigator Hotel last week, who is in despair at these additional costs and fearing for the future of her hotel and indeed for the 10 employees who work in that hotel. What reassurance can you give her?
Absolutely. Yeah, the tourism tax is an appalling tax. We've said it will do immense damage to an already overtaxed industry. And the Honourable Lady, I think, will be aware that there is a consultation going on. I think we all need to encourage our constituents, particularly those working in these sectors, to participate in the consultation to make sure that Labour don't do the damage that we fear that they may do to an already hit sector. And of course, many sectors of the economy rely on seasonal employment during peak times, whether that's food production sectors during peak picking and growing seasons, retailers in the run-up to Christmas, or the hospitality and tourism industry over peak summer season and, of course, during school holidays. But if the Minister and MPs on the Labour benches had actually been engaging with and listening to businesses in their constituencies or across the country since they came to power, they would know the frustration that so many of those businesses feel. They want to employ more people, especially young people. They want to give learning and skills development opportunities, perhaps to people with their first job. But they have been unable to do so because Labour's policies are making it unaffordable for them to do so. And how bizarre is it, as my honourable friend pointed out a few moments ago, how bizarre is it that the government announced plans over the weekend, note, Madam Deputy Speaker, over the weekend, not to this House, to help young people with skills-building opportunities in hospitality, care and construction through taxpayer-funded government schemes. The very industries that the government is undermining with its own tax policies. If the government didn't attack these industries, businesses would be generating these opportunities and these jobs of their own volition, not needing government handouts. So rather than spend £820 million using public money to help create jobs that may not be sustainable, surely it would have made more sense not to have taxed the hospitality, construction or care sectors in the first place. Even hospices weren't exempt from the national insurance increases. Yeah, good work.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. I mean, there's a very fundamental misunderstanding, I think, between this side and that side of the House. That side seems to believe that the government creates jobs, the government creates wealth, the government creates everything. On this side of the House, we recognise that actually it's individuals who get up in the morning, who group together, and we call those groups companies. They try and come up with ideas, they try and stretch themselves, and they try different ideas. Some of them succeed, some of them fail, and actually relieving the pressure on them is not somehow letting them get away with something. It's enabling them to express the freedom of ideas that they have. Now, I think the second fundamental misunderstanding, it's not about who's had an experience of a job and who hasn't. It's who's had an HR department and who hasn't. Now, the problem that we've got on the other side is not that they're bad people or good people. As we all know, there's different people on all sides of the house. It's that the reality is that if you have an experience of a business that's only ever had an HR department, that's only ever been large enough to look at different ways of in-year cost savings in that sense, it's not the same as if you're the one who's trying to pay for one person, two people or three people. Now, actually, 80% of businesses in this country have fewer than 10 employees. That's who we're talking about.
Nigel Huddleston.
Yeah, my right honourable friend's making some really important points again, not only the specific examples, but the fundamental difference in political and economic philosophy between our side and their side of the chamber. We believe in personal responsibility, low tax, small government, living within your means, and being unapologetically pro-business because we recognise that it's the private sector that generates the jobs and the economic activity that pays for our vital public services. The Labour side agree the complete opposite. And of course, I think we've recognised, as the leader has said many times, we get into difficulty when we stray too far away from these things. We let down the country, we let down the economy when we stray away from our principles. Labour let the country down and destroy the economy when they stick to their principles. I'll give away to the Honourable Lady.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. I think to his point about the employment of young people, in somewhere like Northern Ireland, we have one of the highest levels, if not the highest level, of youth unemployment and young people not in education, training or employment. Would you agree with me that the budget absolutely hammers any prospect of those young people being employed in hospitality or tourism, for example?
Nigel Huddleston.
Yeah, the Honourable Lady is obviously speaking to her constituents and businesses in her constituency, and of course young people who are extremely disappointed and feel let down by this government and their economic philosophy, which is why the budget announcement and then followed by this announcement recently, we're now going to kind of help them a little bit with some public money, is just bizarre. It shows that they do not get basic economics, and it's particularly hitting young people. Now, I'll give away briefly to the Honourable Gentleman again.
I do thank you for giving way. Under a Conservative council and Conservative government, Stoke-on-Trent had one of, if not the highest NEAT levels anywhere in the country. Those numbers are now coming down. What does he think was the reason why my city had to endure that under his government and his council? And would he accept that part of that was because economic growth in this country was not equitably felt across this country, and that economic growth that only takes place in one part of the country is equally damaging as much as some of the things he is professing to be damaging today?
Yeah, I do agree with some of the principles that the Honourable Gentleman articulates there in terms of the need for economic growth to happen outside of the M25 as well. London is a great dynamo. It needs to be London plus, but we do need to make sure that we grow across the country. But that, of course, was exactly the point of the levelling up agenda. But I'm afraid we can't have this kind of wishful thinking of forgetting that both the economic crisis in 2008 and then, of course, the pandemic and the other global crises had a major impact on the economy, and therefore economies around the world were challenged. The difference in where we are now is that our economy is doing badly uniquely because of Labour government decisions. That's the difference. So, of course, the national insurance increases, Madam Deputy Speaker, in last year's budget alone cost the hospitality industry over £1 billion. The business rate increases that they're facing now make matters even worse. This isn't so much giving with one hand and taking with the other, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's giving with one hand, then punching them in the face, and then giving them a good kicking when they're down on the ground as well. That is an appalling attitude to take towards business, but that is this government's attitude. I'll give way.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. Just last week, I visited one of the many fantastic cafes in my constituency where the hard-working owner told me that she had chosen not to take on a Saturday job worker, somebody, a young person, as a direct result of the increase in business rates. Does he agree with me that because of the policies of this government, it is directly affecting employment for young people in Chester South and Edinburgh and across the country?
Nigel Huddleston.
Yes, and I had the pleasure of visiting a cafe in the Honourable Lady's constituency. I sincerely hope it wasn't the one that we visited, but this is a common theme across the country, and we're hearing it on way too many occasions. And what's interesting as well, these businesses, these business owners, often very small businesses, feel really guilty that they cannot employ people in a way that they would want to, that they can't give the Christmas jobs and so on. They should not feel guilty about this. The government should feel guilty about that.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Does he agree that it's not just the tax rises, the additional cost burden that's causing a lack of confidence, but that lack of confidence in itself is probably the most corrosive aspect of all, because once that's entrenched, it's very hard to unpick, particularly when business is repeatedly facing a government that is doing the exact opposite of what they pledged in their manifesto.
Nigel Huddleston.
Yes, and the honourable gentleman knows confidence is a major driver of economic activity, and when the public, when consumers and when businesses don't have confidence, all things fall apart. And we've had a significant change of direction. I'm afraid I can't see this confidence returning. As I said, I don't get any joy saying that. I want the government to get their act together. I want them to be economically competent for the sake of our constituents. Very briefly, and I'll try and conclude.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. I just would interested in him suggesting that our principles were the thing that causes the problem. Which bit of our plan for small and medium-sized businesses, action to tackle late payments, reducing regulatory burdens and expanding access to finance does he disagree with?
Yeah, I mean, this is just noise. The Honourable Lady needs to speak to businesses in her constituency, and I think she'll... Well, the facts are the national insurance increases, the business rates increases, the additional burdens on businesses. If anybody in the opposition benches can name any major business organisation that's welcoming the employment bill, the unemployment bill as we call it, then I would welcome them to do so now. But I don't think they can, because it's anti-business. That's the point. We're pro-business, they're anti-business. The principle is really key here. To be pro-business means being pro-workers and being pro-public sector, because that's how the taxes are generated. And the government have the exact different... I won't give way. I'll give way in a moment to somebody behind me, but I do need to... I'm aware, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm on the final stretch. Yes. Now, I can only assume... I can only assume, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the Labour government just doesn't understand the negative impact that its tax policies are having on the tourism, hospitality and leisure space, because to do such harm willingly is pure economic vandalism. This government's lack of understanding of the private sector and how jobs are created beggars belief. But none of this would be necessary with a competent pro-business government. There is an alternative. A pro-business, conservative alternative that backs business, that wants the private sector to succeed, that backs entrepreneurs and wealth creators, and has policies that enable job creation and economic growth through policies such as the 100% business rates relief for retail, hospitality and leisure. But instead, this government has decided on an economic strategy that punishes enterprise, burdens the taxpayer, disincentivises work, increases dependency on welfare and grows the size of the public sector. That is the wrong strategy. The Labour government is destroying the economy. They promised change at the last election, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, we certainly got it. Slower growth, higher taxes, higher spending, more debt, more welfare and higher unemployment. Time and time again, Labour have betrayed the trust of the British public. And we on these benches will not tire of holding this disastrous Labour government to account for their utter incompetence. The country cannot afford 3 more years of this, Madam Deputy Speaker. Britain deserves better. Thank you.
The question is, as on the order paper, I call the Minister to move the amendment. Minister Blair McDougall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move the amendment in the name of the Prime Minister. Around this time every year, I like to reread A Christmas Carol. And last night I read that passage from Dickens where the protagonist says that, quote, "Every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. And I have to say the tone of that speech from the honourable gentleman made Ebenezer Scrooge sound positively festive. I say to him, we recognise it has been a hard few years for business. We, despite the appalling economic legacy that his party left us, in this festive period, we can look forward to the new year with a sense of optimism. Living standards are rising. Wages are growing faster than prices. The Productive Business Index a few days ago found that nearly 3/4 of small businesses expect revenue increases over the next 3 months, and nearly 2/3 have seen rising order volumes in the last 3 months. And the honourable gentleman mentions, as did other members, Small Business Saturday. Small Business Britain report that spending during Small Business Saturday last weekend was the highest it's been in 5 years. And Madam Deputy Speaker, despite what the honourable gentleman says, I ran a business for a decade, and I know how hard the last decade was. I'd be immodest to agree with what he says from a sedentary position. I will give way, yes.
The honourable gentleman, on Saturday last, I was in Herne Bay in Mortimer Street, where there is an absolutely fabulous toy shop called Kids Corner. It was empty. I said to them, how are you doing? And they said, the shop's empty, the street is empty, nobody is spending any money. The hospitality industry is on its knees. My honourable friend, the member for Canterbury, and I attended a round table recently where every single person present said that they were having a hard time and some were in danger of going into liquidation. One cafe, and I raised this in the House earlier this week, one chain of cafes employing young people, 25 cafes. In the last 12 months, over those 25 cafes had a profit of £12. That is due entirely to this government's policies.
Well, the honourable gentleman hits the nail on the head when he talks about people not spending money. That's exactly why this Labour government is taking action to put money into people's pockets. And we've got to realise and recognise that a big part of the reason why it's been such a difficult 10 years for business was because of stagnating living standards, because of stagnating wages under his government. And I know that hospitality, leisure and retail, who have very thin margins, have been hit especially hard by the pandemic, by the cost of living crisis, by changes in shopping habits. But it's exactly because of that we recognised it and published for the first time in a decade the first strategy for small businesses from government. It's why we're putting more money into people's pockets. And it's why actually the fiscal credibility that they just do not seem to value at all on that side of the House matters to our constituents. Yes.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way. The Globe Inn in North Petherton is a fantastic local pub. This financial year, its business rates bill is zero. By 29-30, it will be £5,000 thanks to this government. That's an extra 10,000 pints they will have to sell to meet that extra cost. How is the government's strategy helping them?
Minister McDougall.
Well, you'll know about the transitional relief that we're putting in, and I will come to that in a moment. But we are putting more money into people's pockets. I spent 5 days last week speaking to small businesses. I was in Staffordshire, I was in the North West, I was in Scotland, meeting with dozens of small businesses. And all of them said to me the same thing, was that what they want is footfall. As the right honourable gentleman said, they want people to start spending money again and to get customing. I'll make some progress for a second. And we are lowering costs. The honourable gentleman mentioned the burden of regulation and red tape. I have to ask, where was he for the last 14 years? When we came to power, we inherited a situation where businesses were spending 380 million staff hours on form filling and red tape every year. We are getting into that now in a way that just did not happen. I'll give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. And on that point, it's important to note that businesses like the Co-op and IKEA are supportive. And on the point of red tape, businesses in my constituency tell me time and time again that bureaucracy is holding them back. So can he outline further how we're going to be cutting red tape?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with a few weeks ago, where we removed thousands upon thousands of particularly smaller companies from having to engage in so much of the corporate reporting, which was completely unnecessary, saving about £250 million on the way to our wider effort and our wider target of cutting the regulatory burden by 25% and cutting £5 billion. I'll give way to the member of the...
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way. I invite him to visit the hairdressers in Aldwick in my Bognor Regis and Southampton constituency, who will tell him that he spends hours after hours to ensure that he can even stay profitable. So you might be withdrawing some aspects of small business paperwork, but it doesn't remove the fact that the maths don't add up. And unless he is spending hours dotting every I, crossing every T, and making sure that he's cutting costs where he can, his employees won't have jobs to spend more money.
Minister McDougall.
And she makes an important point, which is exactly why we are trying to drive down costs for business, not least when it comes to red tape. And if there is something in particular that your constituents' business, I don't know if it's the hairdressers that you frequent yourself, maybe I could pop along, and I'd be very, very happy to listen.
Order. Minister, I don't wish to put on the public record which restaurants I do and do not frequent, so continue, Mr McDougall.
Madam Deputy Speaker. And they raise business rates as well. It's exactly because we recognise the stress that retail, hospitality and leisure face that the smallest of those properties will have now the lowest business rate since 1991, and those with values below 500,000 will be at their lowest rate since 2011, a permanent tax cut worth nearly £1 billion a year and benefiting over 750,000 retail, hospitality and leisure properties. I will give way one more time to the...
Thank you very much to the Minister. And I'd just like to tell him about Charlie Cockaday, who runs the Fox Inn in Feltham. He tells me that with the new business rates coming through from this government, he will be paying £1,600 a month more in business rates going forwards. That is the equivalent of 35p per pint that he sells. So how does that equate to putting more money in people's pockets?
I'll talk about the transitional relief that we've put in. Under the plans we inherited with this valuation, pubs were looking at rate bills increasing by about 45%. Because of the relief that we've put in, that's about a tenth of that in terms of percentage. So we are acting. But I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, the party opposite knew that this revaluation was coming. They knew that the temporary COVID relief was coming. And how much did they have in their financial plans to help businesses with this? Nothing. 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 Not a single penny was allocated for it. And now they criticise us for having put in a £4 billion package to help businesses with that. And worse than that, Madam Deputy Speaker, they also oppose the higher business rates on the warehouses of online giants that we've put in place, which is exactly what is paying for the structural change which allows for permanently lower business rates on retail and hospitality. I'll give way to and then I'll make some progress.
Grateful to the Minister. But the reality is, and we all understand this, governments have to make choices. But the choices that this government has made is not to cut spending
on welfare, which has limited the choices elsewhere. There is a real choice there, and if this party had been in power, we wouldn't have taken those choices over the summer, which would have meant the budget would have been in a very different place with respect to hospitality sector.
Which was exactly my point, that you were not going to make these choices. They were not in your financial plan. They were not in the honourable gentleman's financial plans, and they are in ours. I will, but only because I have deep affection for the honourable gentleman.
Minister is a charming and soon to be very well haircutted gentleman, no doubt. But the point that my honourable friend was making, and I'm afraid that reinforces it, is it was clearly not in the government's plan either. Otherwise, they wouldn't have brought through the welfare changes they planned in July, but have since been bounced out of by their own backbenchers. So clearly, it wasn't their plan either, and that's why we're in this position.
But it isn't our plan. We have just passed this budget which gives this relief on business rates. And let me continue perhaps with and return to the theme of A Christmas Carol and visit with the ghost of Christmas past. Perhaps we could travel back to when the honourable gentleman gushed about Liz Truss's mini budget with her unfunded tax giveaway as representing, quote, a new era which he said would help everyone with cost of living pressures. Well, unlike Ebenezer Scrooge, the honourable gentleman has not repented. He has not seen the error of his ways and the impact of unfunded commitments. Instead, he's at it again, calling for tax cuts without any idea whatsoever of how to pay for them.
Yep. I thank the Minister in a way. The members opposite talk about political choices. They made a political choice to bring in austerity, which meant that actually there was lack of funding to the NHS. My constituent of Harlow is full of sole traders who say to me what really affects their ability to earn money, to actually have money in their pocket to spend in the pub or other establishments, is the fact they have to wait for years on end to get a doctor's appointment or to actually get an operation. So would he agree with me that the right choice that the Chancellor has made is to invest in NHS to ensure we get the waiting time down so that my workers can get back to work?
Minister McDougall.
He's absolutely right, and of course that's one of the more important ways we get the welfare bill down as well and get more money into people's pockets and ultimately more money into tills. But instead of these fantastical unfunded tax cuts, we're giving real help to high streets across the country. Millions of British people will benefit from the £5 billion Pride in Place programme, which puts local people in 339 neighbourhoods in the driving seat of renewing their own areas. I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I'm also grateful to the government for the fact that Ramsgate in particular is benefiting from the Pride in Place Fund. But more widely, on the issue of seasonal work, which is vital for coastal communities like mine, can you confirm that seasonal workers and people who work in hospitality will benefit from many of the measures in the budget that tackle the cost of living and raise their wages, for example, the minimum wage, cuts to energy bills, and indeed freezing of bus and train fares? Minister McDougall.
Absolutely, and on this side of the House we recognise that link between standard of living and how business sustainability is working. She mentioned her own area benefiting from Pride in Place, and the honourable gentleman's part of the world. You've got Smethick, Darlaston, Bilston, Dudley and Bedworth all receiving funding through Pride in Place. And in addition to that, we're also making sure that we protect the character and the safety of high streets. Because again, what small businesses say to us again and again is that they need footfall, so we need to make high streets an attractive place to go. So we're clamping down on the illegal high street activity in premises such as mini-marts, barber shops, vape shops and nail bars, and at the budget announced an additional £15 million a year more alongside wider measures to tackle those bogus retailers. Yes.
Minister for giving way. Has he compared and contrasted Pride in Place with the Future High Streets Fund, which is a proven mechanism for uplifting the state of many of our high streets, including Trowbridge in my constituency? But he's trotting out a load of things he thinks are going to benefit retail and hospitality. The whole point about retail and hospitality is they have to be welcoming places and open to all. What then does he make of the dozens of pubs and restaurants up and down the country
that are now feeling forced to put up signs in their windows saying no Labour MPs?
Minister McDougall.
Well, I've yet to see any such pub with that sign. And my friend, my honourable friend from Stoke-on-Trent Central, in terms of the other scheme that you mentioned, spoke about how disastrous the implementation of that was on the ground, and we're trying to learn lessons from that. But the honourable gentleman also criticises on the Employment Rights Bill, and I compared him to Scrooge earlier on, but I'm sorry to say that here is where he is even less charitable than Dickens' great character. Scrooge famously wanted, indeed insisted, on his workers having regular hours over Christmas. The honourable gentleman doesn't seem to want that. Even Scrooge, by the end of the story, gave Bob Cratchit a pay rise so that his family could enjoy Christmas, and here he is arguing against it again. I'll give it to him.
Now.
I do thank the Minister for giving way. I remember sitting on that side of the House when the Conservatives were in government, and they would be, I won't be here, they will be trumpeting they're increasing the minimum wage, and the creation of the living wage is a demonstration of their commitment to helping low-paid people in this country. Does he worry now that if you take the point that the honourable gentleman's opposite been making and extrapolate to its natural conclusion, they're actually advocating for a cut in the minimum wage as a way of helping business, which would be detrimental to the thousands of people in Stoke-on-Trent that rely on that money to pay their bills?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with him more, and just again not understanding that link about what is in people's pockets and what goes into the tills. And can I also say I spent a fantastic day with you with your local businesses last week, and was impressed how they all were on first name terms with the honourable gentleman. I will, yes.
Would the honourable member not agree that part of the problem was caused by the members opposite, who didn't welcome the minimum wage in 1998, said it was going to destroy businesses, and then later, when they got in, split the minimum wage so people over 25 got more than people under 25, causing this inequality, which is what we're having to deal with now?
She's absolutely right, and I recall as a younger man working in this place, the all-night sittings as the Conservatives united with the people in the other place to try to stop our effort to make work pay for people, and here we are again a quarter of a century later. Sure.
The issue, Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman was in here while governments were coming up with their plans and their policies in 1998, while I was starting a business and running it and employing people. And the difference is that you can't install a minimum wage if someone actually doesn't have a wage at all because they haven't got a job. Yeah. And what his party are doing are putting people out of work. There are now 31% more young people not in employment in the Gosport constituency than there were this time last year. That's a disgrace, isn't it?
I don't know if she was at the start of the debate, but she would have heard me talking about I ran a business as well. But she talks about job creation. In the first year of this government, 138,000 more jobs. We have to understand. No, I've given way several times. I have to make some. But the government is fully supportive of the variety of working arrangements that people, including young people, might choose depending on their circumstances. But the word, Madam Deputy Speaker, is choose. Until now, that flexibility has been entirely one-sided, something that employers have used to their benefit. But it's time to let workers have their rights. And the honourable member for Stoke-on-Trent asked the question about whether people on the other side of the House understand what it is like to be an insecure worker, particularly at this time of year. This is the most expensive. I'm nearly finishing. I'm coming to a close, but thank you. At this time of year, this is the most expensive time of the year. It's the most expensive month. On this side of the House, we are proud to be acting to ensure that families can plan for the expense of Christmas, that families can look forward to Christmas without worrying about the anxiety of whether they can make it to the end of the month. And the criticisms of that and the lack of understanding from the other side about how important the cost of living and the money in people's pockets is to the success of business is, quite frankly, humbug.
I call the spokesperson Liberal Democrats. Give me. The original question was as on the order paper. Since when an Amendment A has been proposed as on the order paper, the question is that the original words stand part of the question. I now call the spokesperson for the Liberal Democrats, Sarah Olney.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to speak in this debate. Training, hiring and retaining a skilled workforce are issues affecting businesses across the country. Many businesses, such as in the farming and agricultural sectors, depend upon recruiting the right people at the right time. Obstacles to hiring seasonal workers could have a significant impact on businesses, which are already struggling with sky-high energy bills, trouble recruiting the workforce they need, and are facing high costs in trading with Europe. We're seeing a practically stagnant economy, with business confidence down and unemployment up, and this is particularly prevalent amongst young people, many of whom traditionally found their first jobs in the hospitality sector, the largest employer of young people. However, this sector is struggling to employ new workers, and the damage that's being done to the prospects of our youth struggling with unemployment levels will be detrimental to the broader economy in the years to come. Many of these challenges began under the administration of the last Conservative government. It was the previous government who undermined farming, agricultural, hospitality, so many other sectors dependent on seasonal work, by negotiating failed trade deals with the EU, with Australia, with New Zealand, and breaking their promise to reform business rates. Their record is a dispiriting picture of low growth, high interest rates and falling living standards. People endured years of Conservative mismanagement, which is why it's so disappointing that this government has wasted the last 18 months by failing to pursue policies that promote growth and by imposing an unfair national insurance jobs tax that has stifled business investment.
Will my right honourable friend give way?
Happy to.
I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for giving way. In the West Country, we've seen an icy chill effect of the Nix hike on our hospitality and tourism industry, particularly in Torbay. The Torbay Coast and Countryside Trust that has looked after some of our beautiful natural spaces has had a £100,000 cost of the Nix hike on them, which has forced them to close their doors and take a step into the dark. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the government needs to explore the impact of the Nix hike on some of these fragile sectors of our economy and see how they can step in to support them? Thank you.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and it's tragic to hear about the closure of his local organisation there, not just depriving local people of the opportunity to enjoy the services that they were providing, but also, as I was saying, depriving young people in particular of the opportunity to take their first job. On the Employment Rights Bill, Liberal Democrats have been clear. We welcome many of the principles underpinning the legislation, but we've been pushing the government to make crucial improvements to ensure that it properly delivers for workers and small businesses. We strongly believe in giving all workers security over their working patterns, and we're deeply concerned that too many struggle with unstable incomes, job insecurity and difficulties in planning for the future. On flexible work, we'll continue to advocate for what we think would have been a fairer and less onerous system, based on giving workers a new right to request fixed hours that businesses would not be able to unreasonably refuse. And when it comes to seasonal work, we are glad, thanks to the work of the Liberal Democrats in the House of Lords, the government has made significant concessions for the benefit of businesses and workers, placing a statutory duty on the Secretary of State to consult with key stakeholders before exercising powers to specify what a temporary need is in relation to the right to 0 hours contracts provisions. And we're also pleased the government has listened to Liberal Democrat calls for clarity by providing examples of how an employer could approach seasonal demand while complying with the new right to guaranteed hours. These provisions, secured by Liberal Democrat peers, will support workers by giving them more control over their working hours while ensuring that businesses are properly consulted and given the resources to navigate this new legislation. This weekend, towns across the country mark Small Business Saturday, but many small businesses will have struggled to celebrate given the challenges that they're facing. Recent government decisions, including the devastating business rates hike in last month's budget, are causing huge damage to small hospitality firms, with many now considering whether their business remains viable. Happy to give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Tourism is vital to the economy of West Dorset. hospitality in West Wales is one of the largest employers. Our population soars by 40% during the summer months. These businesses require seasonal workers. Given all the headwinds that she's outlining facing the high street, facing UK hospitality, does she agree that the government should reward the sector or look after the sector with a 5% drop in VAT?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. He's absolutely right. The hospitality sector has been disproportionately impacted by the hike in national insurance contributions because it employs generally people on lower wages for a shorter period of time, and with the decrease in the threshold in particular, that has been very damaging to many businesses that have that kind of employment pattern. But my honourable friend is absolutely right. What we really need to be doing is boosting growth, boosting demand, and we think that that can happen by introducing a 5% decrease in VAT for hospitality businesses. Because we need the government to give hospitality the tools it needs to grow and help boost the wider economy. Thousands of venues are facing steep and unprecedented cost rises, making this a critical moment for the hospitality sector. And I urge the government to tackle this cost of doing business crisis by adopting our proposal on VAT. Pubs, bars... Yes.
How much would the 5% VAT
Dr.
cost?
Nick Evans.
Policy cost?
Grateful to the honourable member for his point. The cost of the VAT cut could be met by
How much is it?
I believe off the top of my head it's about 9 billion. But what we think is that that could be met by the money we've lost from leaving the European Union, from Brexit. £25 billion a year has been lost to the Treasury as a result of leaving the European Union, thanks to the Conservatives' botched Brexit deal. And there are so many better ways that we could have been spending that money that the Conservatives' botched Brexit deal has cost us. Pubs, bars, cafes and restaurants across the UK who rely on seasonal workers need all the support they can get, so I sincerely hope that ministers will listen. Today's motion calls for the abolition of business rates, and the Liberal Democrats agree that we need to see a complete overhaul of this unfair and damaging system. However, in 2019, the previous Conservative government promised a fundamental review of the business rate system, which they failed to deliver. And in their recent budget, the government committed to rebalancing business rates, but we saw nothing of the sort. UK Hospitality says that the average tax increase for hospitality will be 76% over the next 3 years. Meanwhile, warehouses, offices and large supermarkets will see bills go up by just 16%, 7% and 4% respectively. The Chancellor said she's looking to introduce permanently lower business rate multipliers, but the painful reality is that the new higher valuations will wipe out any benefit that businesses might have seen. Increasing the minimum wage, as the government announced in the recent budget, is of course welcome and will support millions of low-paid workers, but it's not just workers that need a boost, it's small businesses too. Unless businesses are able to grow, there's a danger that the long list of cost pressures they face will result in fewer jobs being available overall. Happy to give way.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. Talking to small and medium-sized enterprises in my constituency of Shipley, they really welcomed the announcement that there would be free training for apprenticeships so that they can actually help the next generation of young people get into higher skilled jobs and to have careers. Does she agree and support the government's announcement about the apprenticeships as part of the Youth Guarantee?
I thank the Honourable Lady, my colleague on the Public Accounts Committee, for her intervention. She's absolutely right, and I 100% and very wholeheartedly welcome any boost to apprenticeships and that announcement in the budget. However, the caution is, and always continues to be, will there be sufficient business growth to enable those high-skilled jobs to be created that will enable our young people to progress in their careers? Businesses from all sectors across the UK continue to struggle with high energy bills, compounded with the burden of the NICS rise and concerns about certain aspects of the Employment Rights Bill on their monthly employment costs. The cost of employment has risen significantly over the last year, and there have been nearly 70,000 hospitality job losses since last October. Our small businesses face huge challenges, and very many are already struggling to absorb rising costs. So unless more is done to support them, vital entry-level jobs, essential contributions to the culture and character of our local communities may be lost. As this motion looks to examine the challenges facing businesses, perhaps unsurprising omission is the absence of any reference to the damage caused by the last government's failed Brexit deal. The appalling agreement negotiated by the Conservative Party has been a complete disaster for our country, particularly for small businesses who are held back by reams of red tape and new barriers to trade, costing our economy billions in lost exports. The dismal impact of their terrible Brexit deal is becoming increasingly clear. A recent survey of 10,000 UK businesses found that 33% of currently trading enterprises experienced extra costs directly related to changes in export regulations due to the end of the EU transition period. Small businesses have been particularly badly affected, with 20,000 small firms stopping all exports to the EU. And a recent study has found that goods exports have fallen by 6.4% since that trade deal came into force in 2021. And while the Liberal Democrats welcome the steps, even if hesitant, that this government is taking to rebuild our relationship with the EU, I urge the government to recognise that this should only be the start towards a new, bespoke UK-EU customs union, which this House voted for just yesterday. Independent analysis has shown that a closer trading relationship with the EU would boost GDP by 2.2% and would bring in roughly £25 billion of extra tax revenue every year, which would be crucial for fixing the public services which the Conservative Party left broken. Yes, I'll give way.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady, and I'm not suggesting she should have been hanging on my every word yesterday, but she was in the chamber during that debate. I wouldn't call 100 votes in favour and 100 votes against a win. A 10-minute rule bill is going to go nowhere, so why her leader is jumping up and down on social media as if he's just introduced the Magna Carta, I fail to understand. But did she not hear me when I said that in conversations with the European Union, the EU itself will not entertain a new customs union with the United Kingdom? They want to evolve the agreement that we have as per the agreement, but not have Groundhog Day. Which bit of that is her party not understanding? Or are they just ignoring it because it's convenient?
Sarah Olney.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention, and I did listen very carefully to his speech yesterday, which I thought he delivered very well, and I am grateful to him for putting the points against our bill. He is absolutely right. It was 100 on each side. However, it did pass. With the help of Madam Deputy Speaker, who was in the chair yesterday, and it has progressed to its second reading. But I take his point. What I would say to the honourable gentleman is, how does he know? If there is a political movement for change in this country, a political will towards further integration with the European Union, if there is a political will in favour of a customs union, I'll just finish this point if I may, then I think that the EU would welcome that and would be very keen to have a conversation on that part. I'm going to give way to the honourable lady there, and then I will come back to you.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. Would the honourable member not agree that the trade agreement that was signed earlier this year and the SPS agreement, which is actually the EU now have a mandate to discuss and which will hopefully be through by 2027, will make a massive difference to a lot of the export done. So we are getting there. It takes time, but we are getting there.
Yes.
To the honourable lady for her intervention, what I would say, this is very piecemeal. It's taking time. I think if we had a more wholehearted approach to a customs union, we would be able to unlock all sorts of benefits that are not possible with the piecemeal approach. I'm going to give way to the honourable gentleman, and then I will come back to you.
I suggest a new customs union might take a little bit of time. Maybe just a day or two. She asked a perfectly legitimate question, how do I know? In direct response to her party's motion, it's an issue I raised directly with representatives of the European Union. And the answer was, no thank you. That's how I know. I wasn't speculating, it was knowledge.
Sarah Olney.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for sharing that knowledge with us all, and obviously that's something to reflect upon. However, I would say that if it was this is why we're pressing the government, and I think it is the government who hold the purse strings, who hold the pen here, and that is, I think, up to them to be making those advances on behalf of the country. Yes.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, and I will ask this question in the spirit of genuine curiosity, if I may. The trade deal done by the Prime Minister, by the Chancellor, by the Business Secretary earlier in the year with the United States guaranteed more than 200,000 jobs in the West Midlands, in Jaguar Land Rover and in its supply chain. What future does the Honourable Member envisage for those jobs in her ideal scenario where we go back into a customs union tomorrow? And what would she say to my constituents and the people in our West Midlands region about the prospects for those jobs? Has she thought about it, and does she have a plan?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her intervention. What I would say about that is our allies in America are becoming increasingly unreliable, and it is absolutely right that we should look elsewhere for our alliances, not just on trade, but on defence, and recent moves just this week show us on what shaky ground our agreements with the US are built upon, and for the long-term future of the car industry in West Midlands, and of course the future of our whole economy, we need to be looking to Europe to build up those relationships with our European neighbours, because our partnerships with the US are becoming, our allies in the US are becoming increasingly unreliable. I would find, if I was one of her constituents, I would be looking for the government to be fully investigating other opportunities for trade as well as with the US. More broadly, as we look at issues affecting the workforce, Liberal Democrats welcome the industrial strategy that this government put in place alongside a funding boost for skills and training. However, this progress stops well short of the fundamental reform we need to see if we're going to address the workforce shortages which many industries are facing. British businesses must be able to hire the people they need with the skills they need. A key cause of workforce shortages is ill health. To tackle this deeply entrenched problem, the government must do more to invest not only in our NHS but also in social care, so people can get the health care they need and rejoin the workforce more quickly. Any business will tell you that the apprenticeship levy doesn't work, despite the government's attempts at reform. Firms can't get the funding they need to train staff, and hundreds of millions of pounds of funding is going unspent. The Liberal Democrats have long called for proper reform of the levy, replacing it with a wider skills and training levy that will give businesses real flexibility over how they spend money to train their staff. We were pleased to hear in the budget that more details on the wider youth guarantee and growth and skills levy package would be announced shortly, but can the Minister provide a timeline for when we can expect to see this detail? And again, I wish to ask the Minister if they'll set out a timeline for the introduction of a youth mobility scheme which would be beneficial to our economy, easing some of the burdens which the hospitality sector is facing. Businesses across the country, especially our small businesses, are struggling with unprecedentedly high costs, such as the government's unfair national insurance rise, sky-high commercial energy bills and a broken business rate system. And struggling businesses means fewer jobs and lower pay, so it's absolutely clear that we must look for ways to support local businesses and all those that rely on them. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Ewan Steinbank.
Deputy Speaker, in this debate today I'm going to confine my remarks to the criticisms of the Employment Rights Bill because it's where my experience sits, and also as I tried in no small part thanks to the efforts of yourself, Madam Deputy Speaker, to get into the Employment Rights Bill, but sadly was not able to speak on Monday. But saying that, it is imperative that all honourable members do listen to small businesses, as I did this Saturday, as I helped the Falkirk Delivers and Falkirk Business Improvement District team out with disentangling Christmas lights and carrying ladders about Falkirk High Street as they set up their first and inaugural Falkirk Festival of Trees. I would definitely encourage any honourable members to visit any of the vastly brilliant hospitality venues that we do have in Falkirk. But with that out of the way, I am going to focus my contribution on the impact of the Employment Rights Bill. Because what we've heard from the opposition benches, and I would say small businesses are looking for more and solutions. Very few of them said we should either cut welfare substantially in a way that would push children into poverty or rejoin the European Union as the immediate solution. But it is important and imperative that we talk about seasonal workers, not just businesses that hire seasonal workers. It's of course an important perspective we should hear, as I've just stated, but it can often be a parochial view, talking to one side of the labour market, the employer, and fails, I think, to grasp the incentive system that we need to change in order to get people into work, which is what I believe the Employment Rights Bill does do. After years of hearing the stick from government of tough language about benefit sanctions and I think often kicking down at a workless generation, which they directly caused and they directly failed to also address when in government, they now repetitively slam the carrot, which is now the Employment Rights Bill, and this government's broader agenda to make work pay again. So, in lieu, I will provide my own relatively recent experience to the House. With the exception of the pandemic, where I lost my insecure hospitality job, as one of the workers that was not provided furlough assistance because of the nature of the contract I was under, and I had to move in for the first time since I was 17 back with my parents. I've not gone 1 week since I was a teenager unemployed. I spent my weekends after long days of studying law and at school, working behind the bar at weddings and various functions within the hospitality industry and in the retail industry. I did this because of the ethos my family instilled in me as a 16-year-old when I got my first seasonal job at Argos, that nothing is better for your self-esteem, your progression, your social skills, your life, your independence, or ultimately your wallet than to get yourself in and keep yourself in work. And I still remember hitting $1,000 on Christmas Eve 2016 in that first job alongside many of my generation who worked hard during that seasonal job and made sure that that business was running, and then to be told on Boxing Day that I was not going to be kept on in that particular job. What we have to remind ourselves in this debate that the workers who work over Christmas in hospitality and retail and gift shops are the economy that we are talking about here. They are the ones that keep the lights going on in our high streets consistently. But the sectors I've worked in my experience working on minimum wage and insecure, low pay, high turnover and insecure hours are major characteristics, which went my income up until I moved out of the hospitality sector in June 2022 was sometimes enough to pay my digs or rent, bills, food and the occasional trip to the pub or a Falkirk match, and sadly sometimes it was not. This is still the reality for far too many who work in the hospitality, retail, social care and many other sectors, and this is ultimately the reason I got into politics, to improve the lot of those who, despite grafting and seeing little result for themselves or their families, and sometimes working in quite deep poverty, still went in each day and got on with it. That same spirit lives on today in the young hospitality workers who are currently in dispute with their employer at the Village Hotel and View in Glasgow. The hard-working generation that I am a part of are down there once again organising and demanding better, because contributing and keeping our economy going, they deserve fair pay and conditions over Christmas. More than anything, it was the reason I ran for election, because I saw in my generation the corrosive social sickness that the previous government neglectfully allowed this country, and especially my generation, to be infected with. After 14 long years, many in my generation looked at the workplace with no prospect of being able to build a better life than the one their parents had. The last Parliament being the one, I believe, in history in which living standards went down. And for too many in my generation, off the back of that, they could see that they could work hard and see little reward, or they could sit about and see little reward as well. Something had to radically change. This country had to make work pay again. This was the message in the manifesto that we on this side stood on and promised the country that we would deliver if we had the privilege of winning office. This is what the Employment Rights Bill is designed to do, with day one rights to statutory sick pay to allow workers, when they fall ill, to bounce back into the workplace quicker and healthier, day one rights to paternity leave, which was secured this week, and I'm very grateful to the Minister for doing so that fathers can spend their precious first few days they receive at home with their newly born bairns, which I imagine is going to be crucial for many families this Christmas. But saying that, earlier this week, and ministers are aware, I was desperately disappointed when the concession was made to the Tories and Lib Dems in the other place on day one rights against unfair dismissal. The same peers who, throughout the passage of the Employment Rights Bill, have fought on to bargain on behalf of the bad bosses to weaken the sick pay and paternity leave of millions of ordinary people. The obstructions of the other place in delivering the core manifesto commitment, which will benefit so many in my generation and seasonal workers, especially to boot, must be addressed by the government at another time with, in my perspective, far more radical intent in regards to the other place. I cannot and I will not forget the workers I pulled pints alongside. It's only going to be my third Christmas. I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. He's making an excellent speech. An 18 to 20-year-old this Christmas who's serving a pint will be earning £1.40 an hour more. Does my honourable friend agree with me this demonstrates Labour's commitment to young people?
Yes, absolutely. And I also find it disgraceful that the Leader of the Opposition this week has suggested that we should freeze the minimum wage. That means in later years, the workers who are going to keep the lights on this Christmas, in the gift shops, in the pubs, in the restaurants, should be entitled to less. As inflation goes up, well, they're part of the economy. If you didn't have the workforce actually keeping the lights on in the first place, there would be no restaurant, there would be no pub, there would be no Christmas custom, sadly. And that is the experience of far too many people in hospitality. So, as this is my 4th Christmas in my working life that I'm going to be able to spend with my family instead of actually working in the hospitality industry that has been characterised, and I'll be very interested to see if any of the opposing benches can share their experiences. I'll be very interested to hear of that, considering how much experience in business was utilised early in the debate by themselves. I'm not going to forget throughout the progress of my career in this place and the votes that we make, the workers I pull pints beside and serve tables with. I've heard too many stories about kids being bullied, belittled and booted out the workplace by bad bosses in the first 2 years of their working life. I do worry, and I've shared this concern with ministers, that especially in the seasonal work sector, that this will simply happen before the 6-month mark, and I think it is something that we should come back later in the Parliament to address. I would also say to opposing members when they come, I would expect nothing but an apology for the 1.5 million people who were put into poverty whilst in work over their shambolic 14-year tenure. They built a low-wage, insecure, low-productivity economy, all whilst practising austerity, and then come back to this House with essentially the same ideas, but with 200 less MPs. I will give it.
Way. What does he say to the 89,000 people who've lost their hospitality jobs over the last 12 months?
Ewan Steiner.
There was an extensive amount of hospitality jobs lost over the previous 5 years as well. I don't deny, and I speak to small businesses in my constituency every week, that they have had a hard-pressed number of years. I know, I was there. I was working within the industry. I think it is important that we do back our hospitality sector, and I said earlier in the debate that I do think there should be more to come. They talked to me about energy prices as well, which are still substantially, I will give way if he's insistent, potentially with some experience about the hospitality workers as well.
I thank the honourable member for giving way a second time. So 89,000 hospitality jobs lost in the last 12 months. Youth unemployment up to 12% of 16 to 24-year-olds currently unemployed. There's an estimated 40% fewer seasonal jobs this year. That's the biggest decline in 15 years. Energy costs are up, business rates are up, confidence is down, regulation is up. Does he acknowledge that all of this happening at the same time is not a coincidence, and that it must be, at least in part, in relation to the really poor choices made by this government?
Whilst I don't accept the premise, I think it is important to recognise that the hospitality has struggled over a number of years. I'm not in any way denying that at this stage. However, I don't then know why the Employment Rights Bill is contained within this. The have not came into place to date. I would say it is important that we do listen to hospitality and give feedback, but it is also important that we do not discourage young people out of seeking those opportunities out in the first place, which has been seen for far too long for the last 14 years under your government. As I'm going to draw to a close, I won't take any more interventions. Moaning about the rates of maternity pay and the minimum wage being frozen. I didn't hear it, don't worry about it. Moaning about the rates of maternity pay or proposing to freeze the minimum wage is not likely to incentivise more young people to grasp that first opportunity. It's not more likely to make more of the people we talk about here, the NEETs, my generation, actually encouraged into the workplace. A fair wage and fair conditions for your work is what this government are delivering, but I do see that we need to go further and faster, both on employment rights and support for the hospitality industry in my constituency. Instead of stepping back at the first sign of opposition from Tories and Lib Dems, I would say on the employment rights measures. And my honourable friend did point out something that is quite important. The younger workers who are going to be working in our constituencies, because of what this government have done, are going to be £1.40 an hour better off in their workplace. I only wish that back when I got my first seasonal job, we had a government that saw the value of my labour over the Christmas period just as well. So thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Joe Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Tourism and hospitality offer seasonal work, flexible work opportunities, part-time work, and that's why many people choose to work in that sector, particularly young people. Tourism and hospitality is also one of the most taxed sectors in Europe compared to other European countries. So what did the government do for that sector? It reduced flexibility and increased taxes, and that is having real-world consequences. It is little wonder that of the job losses lost under this government, 55% are in retail, hospitality and leisure. Youth unemployment is up too. And it's having real-world consequences in coastal communities, like on the Isle of Wight. Towns